Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bill Mowbray. Bill Mowbray lived in Brownsville, Texas, USA, in 1987. He was a decent and loving man who was married to Susie. This was his second marriage. From his first marriage, Bill had a daughter named Christine, who lived with her mother. When Susie met Bill, she was also divorced and had brought her 2 children to live with them. Over the past 9 years, they have built a happy family together. They were only 4 years apart in age and shared many things in common. Despite Susie's eccentric personality, Bill thought of her as the ideal wife. Bill was dedicated not only to his family but also to his career. After attending college, he began working in car sales and eventually transformed into a prominent businessman. By 1987, he had successfully managed Mal Motors, a Cadillac dealership in Brownsville, for 13 years. Susie actively supported his work, often visiting the dealership and even appearing in commercials broadcast across the city. Their success brought them considerable wealth, making them local celebrities regularly seen on TV. The family enjoyed traveling and owned a large mansion in Brownsville, 2 beachfront villas, and several luxury cars. On the surface, their life appeared enviable, but in reality, it was far less glamorous. In recent years, Bill's business had struggled, with the dealership stagnating and showing no signs of growth. Bill realized he was sinking deeper into debt because his expenses far exceeded his income. Despite facing financial difficulties, they upheld an image of wealth and continued to spend lavishly. As their money problems worsened, it became evident they were facing a serious financial crisis. By 1987, the situation had also severely impacted Bill's mental health. He began suffering from depression and often voiced that ending his own life might be the only way to escape their predicament. For Susie, this was an extremely difficult time. Her husband had never spoken or behaved this way before, and she feared he might do something drastic. His relatives were equally concerned for his well-being. They arranged consultations with a psychotherapist in the hopes of helping him, but their efforts yielded little progress. Bill remained firm in his belief that their family urgently needed money, otherwise, the business would collapse, leaving them on the verge of poverty. A solution to their financial struggles seemed nowhere in sight. Facing the threat of bankruptcy, Susie and Bill ultimately believed their best hope lay in securing a new loan from the bank. On September 15, 1987, Susie, 39, and Bill, 43, called to wish Susie's son a happy 16th birthday. At the time, her son and daughter were visiting their father. The conversation was warm and enjoyable, and everything seemed normal. Later that evening, Susie and Bill watched a TV show together before heading to bed. In the early hours of the morning, around 2:15 a.m., Susie woke up to the terrifying scene of her husband holding a weapon pointed at his own head. Before she could react, he pulled the trigger, using his right hand while lying on his side. Shocked and terrified, Susie called out to him, but he didn't respond. Blood rapidly soaked the bed, and with mounting horror, she realized the gravity of his injury. Panicked, she rushed to the home phone to seek help but accidentally dialed the number of her work partner, Bill Luke Roy, instead of emergency services. Susie told Luke what had happened and confessed she didn't know what to do. Luke immediately urged her to call 911. She followed the advice and called the emergency services. However, she had already lost precious minutes, which forced the ambulance to set off immediately. When the ambulance crew arrived at the scene, they found Susie outside the house, standing calmly with a cigarette in one hand and a drink in the other. Showing no signs of distress, she led the paramedics inside and gestured toward the bedroom without entering it. Inside, Bill was lying on the bed, still alive but in critical condition. He was rushed to the hospital, where he later passed away. The cause of death was clear: a weapon injury to the head. Beside him lay a weapon in a pool of blood. Initially, investigators suspected that he had harmed himself, but they decided to carry out a more thorough investigation before reaching any conclusions. Forensic experts began analyzing the scene. The unusually large volume of blood warranted a detailed investigation. Blood spatters were found on much of the furniture, on the wall near the bed, and even on the ceiling fan. Fortunately, a blood spatter expert was brought in to assist. The expert confirmed that Bill had died from a single wound to the head. The only fingerprints found on the weapon during testing were Bill's. Susie has consistently maintained her perspective on the story since the beginning, asserting that Bill suffered from prolonged depression, had a tendency to harm himself, and had expressed these thoughts to multiple people on several occasions. Some of her statements were corroborated by her relatives and friends, as well as Bill's. Bill, a businessman, had been facing mounting challenges in managing his dealership, which seemed to have worsened his mental health. However, Susie's behavior raised significant doubts. She does not seem to be a grieving widow. Instead, she discusses her husband's death calmly, as though it were merely a trivial matter. Still, this wasn't the primary reason investigators began to scrutinize her further. The most shocking detail emerged in the 12 hours following Bill's death. During this time, Jim, Bill's brother, arrived at Bill's residence intending to speak with Susie, offer her support, and try to piece together what had happened by observing the scene. To his surprise, when Jim went upstairs, he heard music and the laughter of women. When he knocked, Susie came out casually and explained that she was hosting a party with friends. Jim found her behavior to be deeply inappropriate and upsetting. Later, Jim became one of Susie's most vocal critics as she desperately tried to prove her innocence. It was discovered that the women attending the gathering had removed all the furniture and carpeting from the bedroom. Not only were they listening to music and socializing, but the most alarming revelation was that they had repainted the bedroom a different color. Police viewed these actions as obvious attempts to interfere with evidence. Despite these suspicious actions, the blood expert successfully reconstructed the sequence of the incident. It is now clear that the case had nothing to do with Bill's self-harm. Detectives became convinced that Susie was the one who had pulled the trigger. Based on evidence collected on the first day, there appeared to be little doubt remaining. The focus then shifted to the remaining pieces of furniture and the nightgown Susie had been wearing. After thorough analysis, the expert concluded that Bill had been murdered by his wife, who had attacked him in the head while he was asleep. Susie was shocked when accused and immediately sought legal help by hiring a lawyer. The financial difficulties in their family's marriage have been confirmed by multiple sources. Susie said that Bill's unsuccessful attempt to obtain a bank loan led him to harm himself. Bill's family was aware of his dire financial situation, but not everyone believed that Susie was completely innocent. Detectives interviewed a loan officer at the bank who had interacted with Bill. The officer recounted how Bill had visited the bank in a deeply distraught state, even breaking down in tears. Bill reportedly stated that, without approval for a $200,000 loan, he would die. Unfortunately, Bill's financial situation was bleak, and his loan application was rejected. The loan officer had no choice but to turn him down. Numerous witnesses attested to Bill's desperation and emotional turmoil. Despite this evidence of Bill's deteriorating mental health, suspicions about Susie remained strong. Her behavior following her husband's death was widely perceived as celebratory rather than mournful. This interpretation led to widespread public condemnation and further distrust of her character. However, her lawyer firmly maintained her innocence. Bill Mowbray, a businessman, applied for a bank loan to keep his business running and pay off existing debts. However, the bank's refusal devastated him. That evening, he returned home deeply distressed and barely interacted with anyone. Susie did her best to console him, but her efforts did little to ease his despair. In the final days of his life, Bill fell into a severe depression as he desperately searched for a solution to his financial crisis. Later, Susie shared that after this incident, Bill frequently spoke about ending his life. She tried to support him by accompanying him to a psychotherapist. The lawyer worked to find evidence that substantiated Susie's claims, and succeeded. Several of Bill's longtime friends revealed that, approximately a decade before the tragedy, Bill had attempted to end his life. This had occurred in the 1970s, before Susie and Bill married, which explained why Susie had never mentioned it. After meeting Susie, his life seemed to improve, and those close to him believed that his past struggles had been overcome. This information further reinforces the narrative that Bill has a history of self-harm. The defense attorney believed this evidence would strongly support Susie if the case went to trial. He dismissed the notion that Susie was implicated in the crime by the gathering at their house following the tragedy. Furthermore, he argued that the prosecution's case relied solely on circumstantial evidence, which could be easily challenged. Susie's unusual behavior was not enough to indicate that she might resort to violence. Bill's family, however, argued that Susie's actions demonstrated a complete lack of empathy toward him. Meanwhile, an outraged Jim demanded justice for Bill and insisted that the killer be held responsible. Investigators suspect that someone else may have been involved in the crime and are questioning the circumstances surrounding the incident. Specifically, they were puzzled why Bill chose to end his life while lying next to his wife in bed. Typically, individuals who wish to end their lives tend to prefer doing so in solitude. If Bill were to choose to end his own life, he would have two methods to consider: either keeping a loaded weapon nearby, such as placing it by his bed or under his pillow, or waking up in the middle of the night, retrieving the weapon, and returning to bed before using it. Susie claimed she didn't notice Bill getting up at night, though it's possible she simply didn't wake up. She mentioned that she had once handled her husband's weapon after discovering it under the pillow. She explained that he kept it in the bedroom for self-defense, adding that such behavior was typical among Texans. Detectives, however, questioned why there were no fingerprints on the weapon if Susie had truly picked it up. Susie claimed that Bill regularly cleaned and wiped the weapon, but investigators remained skeptical. They began scrutinizing the dynamics of Susie's and Bill's relationship. During the inquiry, they discovered that she had multiple extramarital affairs during her marriage, and, importantly, Bill was aware of them. After numerous acts of infidelity, she and her children had left him and moved to Austin. However, Bill eventually persuaded her to return, and they resumed living together. Despite this reconciliation, many believed the relationship remained deeply strained. Susie and Bill were preparing for a divorce and discussing how to divide their assets, which created significant tension and might have given her a motive to murder her husband. Susie's behavior following the incident raised further suspicions. After the incident, upon realizing that her husband was seriously injured but still alive, she chose not to call an ambulance, a decision that might have increased his chances of survival. Instead, she called a colleague, Bill Luke Roy. Susie claimed she was confused and unsure of what to do in such a situation, so she sought advice from a family friend. This initially led some to speculate that Luke might have been involved in the crime, though no evidence supported this theory. According to Luke, Susie's voice lacked any signs of panic during their phone call. Nonetheless, Luke advised her to contact emergency services, which Susie did without hesitation after speaking with him. When experts investigated the scene and examined Bill's body, they discovered a bullet wound in his left hand. Strangely, despite the close-range attack, Susie, Bill's wife, was not covered in blood. Forensic experts noted that an attack at point-blank range typically produces small blood droplets. However, Bill's right hand was found neatly tucked beneath the pillow, which makes the possibility of him causing harm to himself in this manner highly unlikely. The prosecution built a strong case with a solid motive: financial gain. Susie, Bill's wife, appeared to benefit greatly from her husband's death, particularly in terms of insurance. Shortly before his death, Bill had made significant changes to his insurance policy. He increased the payout amount to nearly $2 million but removed Susie as a beneficiary. Instead, he designated the payout to his daughter from a previous marriage, Christine. Susie had even contacted the insurance company in advance to confirm the details of the policy. Crucially, these changes to the policy were set to take effect just days after Bill's death. During her call with the insurance company, Susie uncovered crucial information, which indirectly pointed to the possibility of a motive to act quickly. With Bill weighed down by financial troubles, his death could secure the money needed to resolve their outstanding debts. Apparently, Bill had removed Susie from the beneficiary list due to a lack of trust in her and instead sought to provide lifelong financial security for his daughter. This situation raised several troubling implications. Firstly, if Bill had planned his own death, He likely would have waited for the amended insurance policy to officially take effect, which would have occurred in just a few days. Furthermore, as someone knowledgeable in legal and financial matters, he would have been aware of Texas laws regarding voluntary death. Specifically, insurance policies do not pay out compensation to beneficiaries if the insured dies voluntarily within 2 years of the policy's activation. This means all of Bill's intentions to secure his daughter's future were doomed from the outset. Detectives believed that Bill had no intention of ending his life willingly. When he spoke about such matters, it was likely to evoke pity or manipulate others, such as persuading the bank to grant him a loan. However, given the strange circumstances surrounding his death, it seemed he didn't end his life himself. Someone might have helped him. Based on circumstantial evidence, Susie was arrested and charged with her husband's murder. At the trial, a key forensic method was used: blood spatter analysis. This technique, first introduced in the 1950s by Herbert MacDonald, played a critical role in providing evidence and substantiating the charges. MacDonald himself testified during Susie's trial, offering essential insights. Blood spatter analysis had been a foundational method in the U.S. justice system and widely accepted for years. However, in 2009, the National Academy of Sciences raised doubts about its reliability, emphasizing that accurate and meaningful use of the analysis requires significant expertise and experience. Evidence in Bill's murder case was analyzed by inexperienced experts, but this oversight was overlooked during the trial. Although blood sample analysis has been heavily criticized, it remains valuable and continues to be used, now exclusively by highly qualified and experienced specialists. In the past, doubts about this method had led to the reconsideration of several convictions. However, by the time of Susie's case, Herbert MacDonald's method was widely accepted and largely unquestioned. During the trial, Susie's ex-husband defended her, stating that he had never observed any signs of aggression throughout their relationship. He also stated that Susie was not even aware of how to use a weapon. Additionally, a family friend named Luke, Bill's business partner and Susie's initial point of contact after the incident, supported her and expressed his belief that Bill may have willingly ended his own life. Luke explained that he had planned to leave the car dealership due to work-related issues, and this decision had deeply affected Bill. In the final days of Bill's life, he reportedly struggled with loneliness. The prosecutor's office persisted in proving its case. To strengthen its argument, it presented the marital bed as evidence during the trial, complete with 2 mannequins representing Bill and Susie, as well as traces of Bill's blood that were still visible. This allowed the prosecution to vividly illustrate its version of what transpired on that tragic night. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury ultimately convicted Susie of murder, sentencing her on June 5, 1988, to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict, Susie still had a group of supporters who believed in her innocence, including her son, Wade, and her daughter from a previous marriage. Both worked tirelessly to overturn the conviction, firmly convinced that Susie had stood by her husband until the very end and was incapable of violence against him. While Susie served time in prison, Wade enrolled in law school and dedicated himself to meticulously reviewing the case. He searched for errors or misconduct by the prosecution and investigators, hoping to find grounds for an appeal. Wade collaborated closely with his mother's lawyer to challenge the verdict and fight for justice. The case required processing a massive amount of complex information, which made the effort time-consuming. Wade was determined to secure justice as Susie had already spent 8 years in prison. Eventually, Susie's lawyer submitted a critical appeal that could not be dismissed. During the prosecution's case, the blood spatter analysis played a key role, but serious concerns emerged about whether the forensic expert had been qualified to handle this aspect. The expert had examined over 40 stains found on the nightgown. Interestingly, the prosecution's main piece of evidence turned out to be its biggest weakness. The defense disputed the accuracy of the tests conducted on the nightgown, arguing that various substances, not just blood, could cause the fabric to glow. Moreover, the nightgown had never been specifically tested for blood, and since it was no longer available, its credibility as evidence was entirely compromised. The appeal was accepted, leading to a thorough reconsideration of the evidence before the 1990 retrial. The absence of blood spatter on the weapon can be explained as follows. The gunshot to Bill's left arm likely occurred while he was holding the weapon under the pillow, with his left hand positioned on the opposite side of his head. The shot caused an exit wound. Certain actions of the experts during the retrial seemed questionable. For instance, the forensic expert who conducted Bill's autopsy made a key statement. Although he admitted that he could not be absolutely certain Susie had killed Bill, he maintained, perhaps to protect his reputation, that Bill could not have harmed himself without external assistance. Given that only Bill and Susie were in the house, Susie was naturally seen as the prime suspect. Wade's legal studies and collaboration with attorneys proved invaluable. Together, they uncovered evidence of a conspiracy that violated Susie's constitutional right to a fair trial. A major revelation emerged when the prosecution brought in Herbert McDonald to re-examine Susie's nightgown and the prior findings. Contrary to the prosecutor's expectations, McDonald decisively refuted the arguments supporting Susie's guilt. However, rather than sharing McDonald's expert opinion, the prosecution deliberately concealed it and continued relying on the flawed evidence against Susie. Wade played a vital role in the fight for his mother's freedom. He now faced the challenge of presenting his findings to convince the jury. His analysis revealed deception on the prosecution's part, which violated the Brady Rule, a requirement for prosecutors to disclose all evidence that could potentially exonerate the defendant. McDonald's findings were pivotal in exposing this misconduct. Finally, Susie's day in court arrived in January 1998. By then, the once vibrant woman had been deeply affected by her years in prison, reduced to a shadow of her former self. Yet, in her weary eyes, there remained a glimmer of hope. She continued to steadfastly maintain her innocence. Susie's friends, who attended the same unusual gathering where the bedroom was repainted after her husband's death, described the event as an odd prank. They explained that it was initiated by a woman attempting to cover up the unsettling red stains in the room. According to them, Susie was unaware that her actions would later lead to accusations of evidence tampering. Both friends defended her, with one stating that the room had not been cordoned off with police tape and no warning had been issued that the investigation was ongoing. In fact, investigators initially concluded that Bill's death was a result of self-harm and showed little interest in the scene. They had planned to close the case and archive it, allowing Susie to remain in the house without implementing any security measures, such as sealing the room with police tape. The other friend explained that the group merely wanted to help Susie, who hesitated to let her children return to a bedroom stained with blood. Influenced by alcohol, they decided to repaint the room before the kids came home. Neither friend believed that Susie was guilty of any wrongdoing. During the retrial, an unqualified expert who had analyzed Susie's nightgown admitted that his original testimony at her first trial was baseless and lacked scientific foundation. Forensic expert Herbert McDonald reviewed the flawed methods used in the investigation and expressed disbelief. The stains were measured visually without proper tools, and there was no confirmation that the stains were even blood. As a result, the evidence was deemed unconvincing. Susie's lawyer presented a compelling argument during the trial, which led the jury to reconsider their stance. They began to entertain the possibility that Bill, Susie's husband, had voluntarily chosen to end his own life. Substantial evidence later emerged, outweighing the vague testimonies provided by several of Bill's friends. The defense strategy focused on one key factor underlying the tragedy: Bill's financial difficulties. After his loan application was denied, his business faced imminent collapse, pushing his family close to poverty. To ensure that his daughter from a previous marriage would receive a larger insurance payout, Bill is said to have decided to end his own life. He spent his remaining savings on increasing the life insurance payout for her. Bill's decision not to wait just a few additional days may have been driven by severe depression or a sudden deterioration in his mental health, which could have left him incapable of fully understanding the legal implications. Accounts of Bill's behavior in the days leading up to his death supported this conclusion. The defense attorney believed their case had been effectively argued. However, during the closing arguments, Susie unexpectedly lost control. As the prosecution delivered its final remarks, she screamed that she had not killed her husband and collapsed in tears. This emotional outburst took everyone by surprise. On one hand, the jury recognized the sincerity in Susie's tears and assertions of innocence. On the other hand, her uncontrolled aggression complicated the situation. Deliberations over the verdict lasted for 4 hours of tense uncertainty. Although no definitive resolution was reached regarding Susie's guilt or innocence, she was ultimately acquitted of all charges on January 23, 1998. Despite her acquittal, she continued to face opposition, with critics focusing heavily on her behavior throughout the trial. While Susie's actions were undoubtedly unusual at times, her supporters, including her son and daughter, attributed her behavior to the emotional toll and stress she endured during the ordeal. Her opponents, however, claimed that her outburst during the trial was a calculated attempt to manipulate the jury. In contrast, her lawyer argued that the outburst was unplanned, insisting that such a risky tactic would have been ill-advised, particularly since the defense had already presented substantial evidence that might have backfired with the jury. During subsequent hearings, it was revealed that the nightgown had never been used as evidence. This omission raised concerns among the investigative team, as items of such significance rarely vanish without explanation. Speculation arose that the prosecution, facing heavy criticism for their strategy, may have intentionally disposed of the nightgown to prevent further examination. This theory gained traction as many believed the nightgown might have undermined their case, particularly given the opinion of Herbert MacDonald, whose expertise could have discredited their claims. Faced with mounting challenges, the prosecution seemingly had no viable path to continue their case. Susie Mowbray was acquitted on her 50th birthday, turning the occasion into a celebratory milestone. She expressed her gratitude to her son, Wade, describing it as the best anniversary gift she had ever received. In a 2001 interview, she reflected on her release, noting that others who had been wrongfully convicted alongside her had already been freed for 3 years. Susie had spent nearly a decade in prison and shared her hope that her children would feel proud of their mother. However, not everyone supported the verdict. Bill's first wife and his daughter, Christine, believed the outcome was unjust, remaining convinced that Susie had evaded accountability for murder. After Bill's death, his first wife revealed that Susie had urgently sold off all of his belongings to secure money. This led to a fierce legal battle between Bill's first wife and Susie over his inheritance. Ultimately, no one received the life insurance payout. Susie had once planned to write a book about her struggles, but since 2002, there has been no news about her. During that time, she went to court in an attempt to reclaim Bill's insurance payout, but she ultimately lost the case. Susie's son, Wade, initially pursued a legal career but eventually left the field to provide advice to other clergymen. Interestingly, Susie, who had previously sought public attention and appeared in her husband's advertising campaigns in the 1980s, completely disappeared from public view after her failed attempt to secure the insurance funds. She did not attend the TV show in 2021 that covered her case, though her lawyer did. The lawyer described her situation as a tragedy, emphasizing that the businessman's widow had spent so many years behind bars, which had destroyed her life, while insisting he had always believed in her innocence. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Stevens. Pinckneyville, located in the United States, is a small town known for its friendly local community and laid-back lifestyle. It is also a great place for fishing enthusiasts. On July 25, 2010, 2 fishermen were fishing in the near Boku Creek Bridge south of Pinckneyville when they spotted a strange object in the water. Approaching it, they realized it was the body of a girl floating face down. Her right arm was tied with a rope to a concrete block, but the body had risen to the surface due to decomposition and shallow water. The body was in a deteriorated state, making identification difficult. The only clues were a belly piercing and a necklace with a musical note pendant. After checking the information in the database, law enforcement officers discovered that a similar girl had recently disappeared. She was Sydney Stephen, 15, who had gone missing on July 19, 2010, exactly 1 week before body was discovered. Sydney's parents, Tracy and Tim, said she had recently suffered from mental health issues after learning that they had separated shortly before she went missing. She was shocked to learn that Tim, the man who raised her, was not her biological father. This revelation led to a mental disorder and severe depression. She ran away from home multiple times, isolated herself from friends, and even attempted ending her life. To protect her, the family decided to keep her at home under supervision. At this time, she was either cared for by her mother, Tim, or her 17-year-old half-sister, Dakota Wall. The house doors were kept locked, and everything was under control until the morning of July 20th, when her mother found she missing at 6:30 a.m. Tracy suspected something was wrong because Sydney's room was in complete disarray, the dresser was overturned, and belongings were scattered everywhere. She called Dakota, who suggested Sydney had run away again. However, Tracy's concern grew when she saw that Sydney was not logged into social media since the previous evening, which was unusual. Upon inspecting the room, she noticed all of Sydney's personal items were still there, including her purse, phone, shoes, and clothes. It didn't seem like she had run away, it was as if she had left in her pajamas and without shoes. Tracy attempted to locate Sydney but was unsuccessful. Sydney's friends were also unaware of her whereabouts, so Tracy filed a missing Sydney report with the police. The detectives were initially hesitant to take on this case. They knew Sydney had problems, so they thought she just ran away from home again and would come back home later. Therefore, investigators shelved Tracy's testimony and only her relatives and friends participated in the search for her. They searched but in vain. A week later, on July 25, 2010, her body was discovered underwater. Her mother, Tracy, was summoned to the police station to identify her. Tracy immediately recognized her daughter's jewelry and confirmed a belly piercing. Dental records definitively identified the body as Sydney's. Once the body is identified, police need to determine what happened to her. The autopsy revealed shocking details, that is, Sydney was murdered. Forensic experts found evidence of multiple injuries, including gunshot wounds and signs of a violent death. This thing stunned everyone. They could not understand why the suspect could target the young girl in such a brutal way. The day before Sydney disappeared, she had planned to go on a hike with her friends, but her mother did not allow it, which made her very sad. She spent the entire day alone under house arrest. When police investigated the house, they found no signs of a break-in. The doors were always kept closed, suggesting that either a family member let the kidnappers in, or they had a key. The relatives insisted they didn't give keys to any strangers. At the time of the incident, only Tracy and Dakota were in the house. The police began questioning the closest relatives, friends, and Sydney's acquaintance, as those close to the victim are often involved in such crimes. Due to the violent nature of the crime, the investigators suspected a personal motive. Tracy reported coming home around 10 p.m. At that time, Sydney was in one room watching TV. Tracy had taken prescribed medication to sleep in her room. Tim was not home that night. He was on a business trip. The most scrutinized individuals were Sydney's sister, Dakota, and her boyfriend, Chad Bennett, who is 20 years old. They both denied any connection to the crime. Dakota stated that she saw Chad the day before, when he visited her to watch a movie, after which he went to work. Chad confirmed her account. However, detectives were suspicious of Chad because he had a criminal record, which included possession of illegal substances and petty theft. As a result, the police brought in his accomplices for questioning, Carl Dane, 18, James Glazier, 17, and Robbie Mueller, 15. All three were friends with Dakota, the old sister of Sydney. During questioning, the young men were evasive and inconsistent in their statements. Ultimately, they told a similar story but with different details. According to their accounts, on the night of July 19, 2010, Carl, James, and Robbie went to Sydney's house. They had a brutal plan as part of their group ceremony, which required performing an evil deed. The plan was to kill Sydney's mother, Tracy, without leaving any evidence. However, as they were moving around house, Sydney woke up, stepped into the hallway, and called for her mother. The attackers stopped her in time, preventing her from making any noise. They held her mouth and nose so tightly that she lost consciousness. Then, they decide that killing Sydney is enough for their initiation ceremony and they choose not to harm Tracy. They carried her body to the car, but she regained consciousness. They continued to torture, beat, and strangle her until she passed out again. They then disposed of her by dumping her into the water, tying a concrete block to her body so it would sink and so that no one can find the body. However, this plan backfired because, during decomposition, gases are formed, causing the body to eventually float. All three individuals, Carl, James, and Robbie, were arrested on July 28. Their story seemed highly implausible. They initially intended to kill Tracy, but instead killed Sydney. Something was evidently amiss. The police suspected that, besides this heinous crime, they might have raped she, as her trousers were down when the body was discovered. However, none of the suspects admitted to this act. The body's condition was poor because the water had erased all evidence, so the police can't confirm this. About the lowered trousers, they denied rape, they suggesting it was related to the influence of illegal substances. Law enforcement knew that gangs have a hierarchy and strict discipline. Although Chad, the leader, denied his guilt, it was inevitable that he was involved in this crime. In fact, the attack could only have been carried out with his approval, especially since he could not avoid participating in the initiation everyone was talking about. It was known that Sydney had gunshot wounds, but members of Chad's team chose not to mention it, resulting in their statements being unreliable. Sydney was shot with a .22 caliber pistol. Carl, a member of Chad's group, who had once met Sydney, possessed a .22 caliber Ruger pistol. This weapon was quite costly, and Carl claimed he couldn't afford it, saying Chad had given it to him. Under the pressure of skilled police questioning, members of Chad's team admitted that he directed their actions. They agreed to testify against he, even though he continued to deny any involvement in the crime. Consequently, Chad was also arrested, though the police suspected there were more people involved in Sydney's murder. They believed Dakota might have been part of it, but she continued to deny any involvement, asserting that she loved her sister and they had a good relationship. Detectives continued their investigation after noticing many inconsistencies in the story. When speaking with the Sydney family's relatives and friends, detectives discovered that Dakota actually despised Sydney. She usually tries to join Dakota in group activities, which annoyed the group, especially Dakota. Dakota wants to spend more time with her boyfriend, Chad, instead of with her. However, Dakota was responsible for looking after she while their parents were at work and also have to clean and do other housework. Dakota couldn't get rid of Sydney, so she had to put up with it. At Sydney's funeral, Dakota appeared happy during the service. She smiled casually and chatted cheerfully with everyone who came to pay their respects. She seemed unaffected by her younger sister's passing. Police followed Dakota and they later questioned her for several hours. The detectives intentionally confused her with unexpected questions to catch her in a lie. Eventually, she began to disclose some details. She admitted that during a trip to another city, Nashville, she overheard her friends from the group discussing what had happened. This was on July 21. just 2 days after Sydney disappeared. She said 2 members of the group, James and Carl, were talking about the murder. At first, she thought they were referring to someone else since Sydney's body had not yet been found, but then she realized they were speaking about her 15-year-old sister, Sydney. They discussed how they beat, strangled, and drowned Sydney, then tying body to a concrete block. Dakota began her story by explaining that on July 23rd, she was with Chad's group at Carl's house, where she overheard a conversation about the murder. Carl mentioned having a gun and he shot someone with that gun. Under police pressure, Dakota disclosed more details, admitting that she knew who was in a car parked near the house on the night Sydney disappeared. These individuals were members of Chad's group. They entered the house and did something to Sydney. She confessed this to the officer, but explained that she had been too afraid of they to speak up earlier. However, Dakota's account was becoming inconsistent. In her new testimony, she alleged that Carl had threatened her life if she informed the police. The officers noted her lack of emotion and how careful she was in giving her testimony. Investigators knew that she seemed pleased about Sydney's death, casting doubt on her innocence. To probe further, the police pretended to know everything about the crime, including Dakota's relevance, but claimed they were unclear about the motive. This unsettled she, yet she did not confess to any wrongdoing. The case garnered public attention. They intensely discussed the shocking crime. Rumors circulated widely, including one claiming that Dakota discovered Sydney's diary a few days before the crime, revealing that Sydney had slept with her boyfriend, Chad, 2 years earlier. It is important to mention that 2 years earlier, Dakota had not met Chad, yet this might have infuriated her as Sydney's older sister. However, the romantic relationship, especially between Sydney and Chad, was never verified and was doubtful to investigators since Sydney was only 13 at the time. Although this motive wasn't confirmed, there were several other possible reasons for the murder. The following day, Dakota was called in for questioning again. She alleged that her boyfriend, Chad, who was accused of the crime, had shown disturbing behavior. He was aggressive and often lost control, attacking people frequently. It seems that he cannot avoid committing a serious crime. He had a conflict with Sydney's ex-boyfriend, Bubby. According to Chad's testimony, he heard voices urging him to attack his family. He even set their house on fire. He also allegedly shot his favorite cat, hitting it with 15 bullets. None of these claims were verified. Detectives also knew that at 10 p.m. on the night of Sydney's disappearance, Dakota called he. It's believed that the group members arrived at her house then, possibly asking Dakota to open the door or planning something before the attack. Dakota did not answer the police's questions about Sydney's murder, and it seems she is deliberately trying to mislead the investigation. As a result, she was arrested for obstruction of justice. However, at that time, the police did not have enough evidence to proceed with a trial. Chad admitted to being the leader of a gang called the City Saints, whose members followed his orders without question. This thing might have endangered Sydney's life. Chad, however, insisted that he never ordered the murder of Sydney and denied any involvement, even expressing regret over the incident. Meanwhile, Carl participated in interrogations for 2 days as the prosecution prepared for the trial. He recounted that on the night of Sydney's disappearance, he had been drinking at night. Then, Robbie, also drunk, came to see him and suggested going somewhere. Carl agreed without asking for details and to feel secure and took a .22 caliber pistol with him. Carl was very emotional during the interrogation and openly cried. This made the detectives question whether he was an accomplice to a terrible murder or no. It was possible that he went for a walk without knowing Robbie planned to kill Sydney. However, the police were skeptical about his tears, as they could be a sign of remorse or a disguise. Carl stated that they picked up James on the way and drove to the Sydney family's house. Robbie climbed over the fence and entered the house while everyone was asleep and Carl waiting outside in the car. After some time, he became worried because they were taking too long. He claimed he went inside to find his friends and leave together. The door from the courtyard was open, providing direct access to the basement where Sydney lived. The police were suspicious that the door might have been unlocked at night, especially since there were no signs of forced entry. It seemed likely that someone helped the criminals approach Sydney unnoticed. Suspicion falls on her sister, Dakota. Carl explained that when they entered the property, they noticed that Sydney had woken up due to the noise. She recognized both criminals, Robbie and James. She asked what they were doing here. Then, she tried to wake her mother and call for help. However, Robbie attacked she, although she resisted, but they overpowered her. He threw her onto the couch and tied her hands, but she fought back fiercely. He then pointed a gun at her. Likely due to the shock and injuries from the struggle, so she lost consciousness. They were aware of her mental health challenges and her history of running away from home, so they decided to make it look like she had run away again. They removed she from the house through the open door, dragged her to their car, and drove off with her to ensure she wouldn't be found. Halfway through the journey, Sydney regained consciousness and began to resist desperately. Immediately after that, one of the attackers forced her to the ground and strangled her. He kept her in that position for a long time, until she passed out again. They then took she to a river by car, but she regained consciousness again midway. During this time, they claimed that she expressed a desire for intimacy, and they had had intimate relations with her. And the strangulation may have been part of a perverted game. Subsequently, Sydney was shot in anger and thrown into the water. However, this testimony of incident was met with disbelief. It was obvious that the intimate intercourse was not of her own volition. Robbie presented a different account to the police. He stated that Carl played a significant role in torturing the girl. Carl had previously been in a brief 3-day relationship with she, but then she broke up with him because he didn't care about her, after which she began seeing someone else. Afterward, he vowed to take revenge on all the girls who betrayed him, starting with Sydney. At that time, no one expected his anger to lead things so far. Robbie, the youngest in the group, at just 15, insisted that he hadn't harmed anyone. As a new member, he simply followed the others and did what they told him, staying within the boundaries of what was allowed. On October 5, 2012, Chad's group members disclosed new information about the case. The police finally gathered enough evidence to build a full case and charge the group members. That day, they questioned Dakota to understand how the door to Sydney's room could have been left open at night. It's known that due to her mental illness, she could pose a danger to herself. Her mother ensured that she couldn't leave by keeping the door always locked. Sydney was under house arrest during all of this. It became evident that the incident was neither accidental nor mistaken because her mother and Dakota were meant to supervise every evening. During questioning, the police were able to get Dakota to confess. She admitted she left the door open, intending to play a prank on her sister, coordinated with members of the group. Finally, the police obtained this long-hidden confession. Later, Dakota disclosed another crucial detail. Before the crime, she had a meeting with Chad's team members, where they discussed their plans. She admitted they intended to kill Sydney. With this information, everything became clear. Even if Dakota didn't directly participate in the murder of Sydney, she was aware of it and did nothing to prevent it. She knew what was going to happen, so leaving the door unlocked wasn't accidental. She planned it to allow the attackers to enter the house and killed Sydney. Investigators believe Dakota underwent a brutal ordeal to join Chad's group, which explained her aided the killers. Her cheerful behavior at her younger sister's funeral was because she completed the ritual to join the group and get rid of her annoying younger sister. Then, their group celebrated after the murder. Carl later acknowledged his guilt, writing an apology letter to Sydney's mother, Tracy, on August 18, 2010. He admitted that he had done evil and now had to pay with his freedom. Even though he knew that it couldn't bring Sydney back to life, but he asked for forgiveness. Tracy read the letter and believed Carl showed no remorse. Although he was arrested early in the investigation, it took 2 years for them to appear in court. Carl Dane pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received the 60-year prison sentence. However, before being transferred to a federal prison, he was discovered dead in his cell, with a note expressing regret for his actions. Another member of the group, James, was also found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 60 years. Robbie Mueller initially sentenced to 37 years, but his sentence was reduced to 26 years after an appeal. He will be eligible for parole in late 2023. The gang leader, Chad Bennett, cooperated with investigators and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, resulting in a 20-year sentence. He took a plea deal and will be eligible for parole in 2026. Dakota received a 26-year prison sentence, with the ability to apply for first parole by the end of 2023. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Andrea Del Vesco. Andrea Del Vesco was born in Chicago, USA, in 1994. Her parents, Arthur and Leslie. Her older brother, James, was 2 years old at her birth, and her younger sister, Alexis, was born 4 years later. The family was happy and loving, moving several times before settling in Austin, Texas. Andrea's mother, Leslie, studied financial marketing at Southern Methodist University. She worked for American Airlines and then as a customer service manager in the mortgage division of Citibank. After her family was grown, she quit her job to become a stay-at-home mom. Andrea's father, Arthur, managed the family's assets as the owner of an investment firm. His hard work helped the family become quite wealthy, allowing them to live comfortably. The family's wealth enabled them to send all their children to university. Before that, the children attended a private school with a rigorous academic program taught by the best teachers in the state. From an early age, they engaged in a wide range of activities, from sports to religion, which helped instill high moral values in them. Andrea excelled academically, played sports, and developed in a well-rounded manner. She loved visiting museums and learning about art. She is kind and caring towards those around her. She has a particularly close relationship with her mother. From a young age, Andrea and her family traveled a lot, which broadened her horizons and exposed her to many different people and cultures. As she grew up, Andrea became her parents' hope and pride. In 2012, after finishing school, she applied to several educational institutions simultaneously. Her parents hoped she would attend the University of Chicago, where her older brother was studying, and for a while, Andrea preferred this option too. However, she decided to wait until she received responses from all the schools she applied to before making a decision. Ultimately, she chose the psychology department at the University of California, Los Angeles. By 2022, this university was ranked among the best in America. It has always been highly regarded and prestigious, with highly qualified teachers and a strong scientific and technical foundation. This choice reassured her family. Andrea then moved to Los Angeles to attend school. Her parents were happy with her decision and supported her choice, although they were worried that she would be too far away. Her brother would no longer be able to take care of her. With the support of her family, she began her new life. Upon arrival, Andrea needed to choose a club to join, which helped her develop lasting friendships and gain support from more experienced students. To become a full member, One usually needed to pass a test and make a small donation. The student community was very close-knit, with many students living so openly that they left their doors unlocked, allowing them to visit each other freely. Although it was generally safe, incidents could still occur. Andrea happily joined the club. She had a great sense of humor, was good-looking, and dressed well. Her impeccable style made her popular. She also created many extravagant outfits that amazed everyone. Andrea was the center of attention at any party. However, she balanced her social life with her studies. After completing her freshman year, she got a job as a paralegal at a law firm in Brentwood, handling administrative tasks. This job did not fit her schedule, so she found a new part-time job. She kept changing jobs to better balance her work and studies, allowing her to have pocket money and not have to depend on her parents. Andrea continued her student life until she graduated in 2015. She always dreamed of traveling after finishing her studies. As her senior year approached, she lived in a dormitory just 5 minutes away from the main university building. This dorm is a great place for students, hosting many sorority parties and university events. Andrea shares her living space with her sorority friends and a small dog she adopted from a rescue. She loves her pet so much that she even has a social media page dedicated to posting cute pictures of it. One day, the dog goes missing, leaving Andrea devastated as she searches frantically for it. Luckily, her beloved dog is found 5 days later. In September, Andrea is preparing to start her senior year of college, with classes scheduled to begin on September 24th. However, the fall semester officially starts on the 21st. On the 19th, she shares one of her favorite music videos on her social media page. The very next day, September 20th, 2015, is the last day before the girls in the club return to school. Everyone was having fun on the balcony of the apartment building. Andrea was at a club activity until 3 in the morning with her friend Jessica. Jessica then went to her bedroom around 3:30 and went to sleep, while Andrea lay on the couch in the living room. However, Andrea could not sleep that night. A few hours later, Samantha, another neighbor, came running to Andrea's door, screaming about a fire. Andrea's door was closed, which was unusual because she always left her room open for her friends in the club. Samantha tried to open the door but couldn't, so she called the other girls to help. Together, with great difficulty, they managed to open the door and found the room filled with smoke and fire. They found Andrea lying motionless on the bed but could not call her because of the danger. Realizing that they could not safely enter the room, the girls evacuated and called 9 people at a time. They waited on the sidewalk for help. Later, the fire truck arrived at the scene. Firefighters quickly used hoses to extinguish the fire on the second floor. A total of 32 firefighters worked to effectively extinguish the fire. After the incident, rumors spread among the students that Andrea was dead, as she had not escaped the building and was not seen. When the firefighters finally entered the room, they found the body of a woman lying on her bed. During the investigation, the police determined that the fire started in Andrea's bedroom. At the scene, the police were unable to identify the deceased because her face was disfigured by the fire. They were only able to confirm that it was a female body. Fingerprints could not be taken because her hands were too badly burned. Surprisingly, the girl's small dog was found by firefighters. The dog was severely burned, barely breathing at the feet of its owner. However, it was later decided to euthanize the dog to reduce its suffering. After the incident, the dormitory students were relocated to different housing while repairs started on the burned building. The girls were frightened, leading the university to enhance campus security. Everyone believed that Andrea was the victim of the fire since all other students were confirmed safe during roll call. They reported seeing Andrea lying on her bed in the room that was on fire and were puzzled as to why she did not get up and leave. They found it odd and speculated that she might have lost consciousness, suffocated from carbon monoxide, or had already died. Andrea's parents returned to Austin from a long trip, unaware of what had happened to their daughter. They began to worry when Andrea did not reach out to them, and their attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Concerned, her mother called one of their neighbors and learned about the fire, which might have involved Andrea. However, the police had not yet confirmed the identity of the body found at the scene. The entire family gathered to pray for Andrea's safety and traveled to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, police began investigating the case. They discovered that Jessica, Andrea's neighbor, was the last person to communicate with her before the tragedy. Police planned to interview Jessica to gather details about their last conversation, hoping she might have witnessed something important. Police interviewed Jessica to learn how the fire started, but her answers were not helpful. She quickly stated that she saw nothing and had no idea what caused the fire. Friends from the sisterhood, who also spoke with the police, suggested that Andrea may have accidentally fallen asleep with an aromatic candle still lit. They were convinced that the fire was not set intentionally, as Andrea had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. To verify this theory, a detailed examination of the incident scene was needed. Initially, they inspected electrical appliances and outlets for any short circuits, but everything appeared to be in order. No candles were found at the scene, and the only item that raised suspicion was the trash can located at the head of the bed. Experienced firefighters speculated that this could be the starting point of the fire. However, friends and members of the sisterhood confirmed that Andrea never slept near the trash can, which was typically placed at the opposite end of the room. Unfortunately, the contents of the can could not be identified without a detailed chemical analysis, as everything was completely destroyed. Forensic experts specializing in arson were called in to investigate. 2 hours after the fire was put out, police were convinced that it was not accidental. The critical piece of evidence was a metal trash can, which someone could have used to pour flammable liquid and ignite a fire. The flames originated near the head of the girl's bed and spread throughout the room. Forensic experts confirmed their suspicions when it was clear that the fire was intentionally set. The investigation at the crime scene intensified. Forensic experts found a large number of traces of blood splashes on the bed and around it, with most of the stains surviving the fire. Police were concerned when neighbors reported trying to call the Andrea as they entered her room at the start of the fire, but she did not respond and was found lying motionless. They feared she was already dead and suspected that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. By this time, the police had already pieced together a rough timeline of the events from that tragic evening. They interviewed many students, focusing mainly on the roommates. According to the roommates, a group of girls had been chatting on the balcony before entering the apartment building. The last confirmed sighting of Andrea alive was at 5:50 a.m. Samantha, her roommate, was preparing for work on campus and saw that Andrea was sleeping on the couch in the living room at that time. Samantha left for work and returned around 6:30 a.m., but Andrea was no longer on the couch. She had gone to her room, but this time her door was closed, which was unusual for her. This behavior struck Samantha as odd, and she wondered why Andrea had suddenly gone to her room and shut the door, especially after being fast asleep before. Feeling concerned, Samantha noted this difference when she then saw the fire. While talking to other students in the dorm, the police discovered a significant clue. A girl named Sarah returned to her room around 5:30 a.m. after dropping her boyfriend off at the airport. Her apartment was directly above Andrea's room. Since it was still dark at that hour, Sarah noticed a male figure as she tried to open her front door. The building was for women, but it wasn't unusual for guys to visit their girlfriends, so she didn't think much of it at first. However, she became alarmed when the man immediately ran away upon seeing her, as if he was trying to hide. This frightened and confused her. She described the man as wearing a black baseball cap, a black and white t-shirt, and dark jeans. Feeling scared, Sarah hurried into her room and locked the door. Once inside, she quickly texted her boyfriend to tell him about the suspicious man she had seen. Unsure whether he posed a threat or if she should contact the police, she shared her concerns. Her boyfriend reassured her that it was likely just someone visiting, suggesting there was no need to panic. Later Sarah went to bed, but around 6:15, she was awakened by a woman's scream and the frantic barking of a dog from the room below her, where Andrea lived. This startled her, especially since the dog had never barked before and usually stayed calm. She realized something was wrong downstairs. Sarah tried to reach Andrea to check on her, but couldn't get in touch. She called 911, but the emergency services didn't take her seriously because the area was known for its student parties and noise. Still, a patrol car was dispatched to the dormitory. The police arrived around 6:23 but left a few minutes later without updating Sarah on their findings. They reported seeing nothing unusual, no person, no barking dog, and no screams. They only shined their flashlights into Andrea's room from the street without conducting a thorough investigation. Believing that someone might have had too much to drink or had an argument that upset the dog, the police decided to leave. Meanwhile, Sarah was watching from the window and tried calling Andrea, but no one answered. She also tried to contact the other girls in the building, but it seemed that everyone was asleep. After the police left, she heard a loud bang at around 6:45 a.m. Sarah rushed to the balcony and looked down, seeing thick smoke rising. She also spotted a stranger in a black and white t-shirt jumping from the balcony below. Panicking, Sarah feared that the man had harmed Andrea. She quickly grabbed her phone and called 911 to report the situation, then ran downstairs, where other students had gathered near Andrea's room, trying to open the door. Sarah quickly left the building to chase the intruder. She spotted him and ran after him down the street, but he escaped by getting into a red Nissan and driving away. Sarah recalled a detail on the car window that had a fraternity sticker. Meanwhile, Andrea's friends had made it into her room. They called out to her, but there was no response. The students claimed they saw her lying motionless on her bed, surrounded by flames. Several girls noticed blood on her neck, chest, and shoulders. In a panic, the friends left the burning house and saw the red Nissan speeding away, with Sarah in pursuit. However, none of Andrea's friends could identify anyone who might have wanted to harm her. All of her friends had cared for her, and at the time of her death, she was not in a romantic relationship. The investigation looked into the possibility of a robbery, but nothing was stolen from Andrea's room. It is thought that Andrea may have met someone on Tinder and the date did not go well. But this has not been confirmed as there are no leads. The police reviewed the surveillance footage from the campus, but it was unhelpful because of its poor quality. They searched all nearby streets for a red Nissan car with a fraternity sticker that had been spotted near the crime scene. Police interviewed all the students, focusing on fraternity members and residents of nearby homes. Nicholas and Mohair later reported a burglary, claiming that their laptops and speakers had been stolen, and one of them said that the keys to his red Nissan were also missing. This occurred on the same evening as Andrea's murder. A few days after the fire, police officially identified the charred remains as belonging to 21-year-old Andrea Delvesco, using dental records provided by her family. An autopsy conducted on September 22 indicated that she was wearing only a sports bra at the time of her death, which raised suspicions of rape, although this could not be confirmed due to the condition of her body. Most of her hair had been burned away, and there was significant blood loss, particularly from the back of her head. Approximately 90% of her body was burned. Forensic experts found multiple fatal stab wounds on Andrea's body, mainly to her head and neck. She had 5 stab wounds on the right side of her neck and 2 on the left, for a total of 19 stab wounds. The lack of soot and carbon monoxide in her body suggests that Andrea was dead before the fire started. This suggests that the fire was an attempt to cover up the crime rather than the cause of death. As a result, the investigation was upgraded to a murder case, creating a sense of fear across the campus. On the day the official forensic report was made public, police traced a stolen laptop and speakers to a man named Joseph in Fresno, California, which is over 3 hours from the crime scene. Police quickly going to his address. When police met Joseph, he claimed that he had borrowed the speakers from his roommate and that he had done nothing wrong. The situation became more complicated when the stolen items were passed around. His friend was Alberto Medina. Alberto claimed that he had lent the items to Joseph, explaining that his friends, who were moving out, had given them to him for safekeeping. However, Alberto then disappeared. Police began searching for Alberto on September 24th. He was arrested 2 days later and brought in for questioning. Alberto's testimony was inconsistent. He said that on September 18th, he went to the University of California with his friend Eric Marquez. They spent the week together, attending a Chris Brown concert and then going to a party with friends who had laptops and speakers. Under pressure from police, Alberto eventually confessed that he had stolen the items from random people while intoxicated and unaware of his actions, and returned home around 5:30 a.m. The police noted that the fire had not started at that time. When questioned about a suspicious stranger, Alberto unexpectedly claimed he was attacked by someone with a gun while they were returning with the stolen items. The attacker fired at them but missed, allowing them to escape. Alberto described the attacker as wearing dark jeans and a black and white t-shirt, matching the description Sarah had previously given. However, the police still expressed doubts about Alberto's story. Alberto suddenly remembered that his friend Eric had visited Andrea, a beautiful blonde woman he met at a party that same weekend. Eric planned to be intimate with her. When Eric returns to the apartment, he acts strange and nervous. Eric says he hit her, and urges Alberto to leave quickly. Alberto's account implicates Eric in Andrea's murder. 5 days after the murder, the police interviewed a new suspect named Eric Marquez. He was 22 years old and a fifth-year medical student at the university. Eric had no previous legal problems and was viewed as a good person. His friend Alberto pointed the police to his home, which was only a 5-minute walk from the crime scene. However, getting Eric to confess was challenging. He stated that he spent the entire weekend drinking at home and hardly went out. Alberto and Eric's testimony was confirmed by surveillance camera footage from their home. When the footage was reviewed, both Eric and Alberto were active from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m., frequently wandering the streets. Alberto was wearing a black and white t-shirt and dark jeans. At 4 a.m., Alberto and Eric left the house for an extended period of time. Alberto was easily recognized by the distinctive tattoos on his arms. A key moment in the footage is Alberto returning to the apartment at around 7:11 a.m., with Andrea's red blanket wrapped around him. This corresponds to the time of the arson. Additionally, a red Nissan, matching Sarah's description, was spotted on video. By 7:30 a.m., Alberto and Eric were seen leaving the house again to throw away some trash. At this time, Alberto was shirtless and Eric had changed his clothing. While the cameras captured this evidence, Eric insisted he could not remember anything. Police obtained a search warrant for Alberto and Eric's apartment. A thorough inspection revealed that Alberto had suffered abrasions to his hands, while Eric had no similar injuries. Police found the red Nissan, which had blood on the steering wheel, dashboard, and driver's door, along with trash and a black sock inside. In the apartment's closet, police discovered a trash bag filled with bloody clothing, Andrea's underwear, and a black sock that matched the sock found in the car, a bloody knife, and a blanket missing from Andrea's room. After conducting the inspection, police gathered enough evidence to formally charge Alberto and Eric. On September 28, Alberto and Eric were charged with murder and burglary, and Albert was additionally charged with arson. Despite the threat of the death penalty, both pleaded not guilty. Their families insisted on a thorough, independent investigation, unable to accept that their son could have committed such a heinous act. Police later interviewed Joseph Garcia, who was found using a stolen laptop and speakers. He claimed that he had witnessed Alberto and Eric returning home that evening. Alberto had confided in him about the incident at the dormitory. He had entered Andrea's room after watching her while she walked her dog, then snuck inside. Alberto took a knife from the kitchen, forced Andrea into the room, and locked the door. He raped her, and when she screamed and fought back, he stabbed her to death and burned the house to cover up his crime. Alberto threatened Joseph to keep quiet. An expert found DNA evidence that showed blood on the suspect's clothes and car matched Andrea's DNA. Additionally, a witness named Julio, a cleaner, observed Alberto getting out of his car and walking toward Andrea's dorm. Julio noted that Alberto had a large tattoo on his arm and was wearing a black and white t-shirt. Alberto and Eric both appeared drunk and said they needed to go to Andrea's room because she needed help. Police determined that Alberto had entered the building while Eric was still in the car, so the blood was only found on the driver's side. Andrea's family was outraged by the police's inaction when Sarah first raised her concerns. The officers neglected to check Andrea's room, the likely scene of the crime. The Los Angeles Police Department announced that the officers involved have been suspended and an internal investigation has been launched to look into their negligence in responding to a call from the victim's friend, Sarah. The findings of that investigation have been submitted to the court. Although the officers were acquitted but were still fired. In the fall of 2016, Eric went on trial for his role in Andrea's murder, along with charges of robbery and arson. Eric and Alberto were charged with animal cruelty due to the injuries Andrea's dog suffered in the fire. In September 2017, the possibility of the death penalty was considered for Alberto. His attorneys urged him to accept a plea deal to receive a lighter sentence and avoid the death penalty, but he refused. As a result, the case was split into two separate trials. Eric was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months after pleading guilty to accessory and abetting. It was determined that he did not participate in the murder or arson. He remained in the car throughout the incident. Alberto Medina's trial began on May 15, 2018. He faced a jury on 5 different charges. Despite this, Alberto chose not to accept the plea deal offered by the prosecution. On May 24, 2018, after extensive deliberation, Alberto pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, arson, animal cruelty, and burglary. The judge decided against the death penalty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, the court imposed another 12 years for other charges. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Rachel Winkler. Rachel Hatfield was born in California in 1975. She is the second of 4 children to her parents, Don and Diana. When she was 10, her father left after her mother had a brief affair with a neighbor, so her parents divorced. Rachel, her siblings, and their mother then moved to Georgia. Then, she and her siblings rarely visited their father because of their strained relationship. Their mother had turned them against him, resulting in a lost custody battle for the father. The family breakup deeply affected Rachel, making it difficult for her to cope with her parents' separation. During her teenage years, she developed anorexia due to stress, and her weight dropped to a dangerous 30 kilograms. She was hospitalized at a psychiatric clinic in Modesto, where she received effective treatment. She eventually recovered, and even took up sports. After her recovery, she started to reconnect with her father, Don. He is proud of his daughter because she is very intelligent and the only girl in the family. The girl is the inspiration for his work. In school, she consistently achieved excellent grades across all subjects. As an adult, Rachel has dedicated herself to her work, with the desire to follow the example of his father, Don, a famous painter. In high school, Rachel met her boyfriend, Tim, who was also an artist. After finishing school, they moved in together. They faced their first difficulties in life, which were financial problems that people in the same profession often face, until they became famous and found their place. When they didn't have painting commissions, they created frescoes to decorate rooms, which turned out to be more profitable. This allowed them to rent more comfortable housing. Rachel attended the University of Sonoma, earning a degree in business and marketing. She excelled in mathematics, impressing her teachers from the start. After graduating with excellent degrees, she was offered a high-paying job, which she accepted. Nevertheless, she continued to support Tim and their art business. They had been together for 14 years, and everyone who knew them was confident they had a bright future ahead, with marriage and children. It seemed they were meant for each other. As Rachel approached the age of 30, she started thinking about becoming a mother. However, Tim was hesitant to support this idea. He wanted to first stabilize their finances, buy a house, and establish himself in his career. Realizing that this would take a long time, so she became impatient, not wanting to wait. This led to conflicts, and their once harmonious relationship began to deteriorate. By July 2005, their relationship was nearly over. Around this time, Rachel attended a dinner party where she met Todd Winkler. He was 8 years older than her and had built a successful career as a fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force. When they met, he also held a degree in computer engineering and ran a successful internet business. He was wealthy, owning a large house and even a plane. In addition to his success, he was attractive and very sociable. Todd had been married twice before. He married his first wife at a young age, but they later divorced due to disillusionment. His second wife tragically died in a car accident in 1999. Eager to find love again, Todd was searching for the right partner. When he met Rachel, he immediately felt she was that person. She was equally captivated by he, and they quickly sparked a romance. She ended her relationship with her boyfriend, Tim, to start dating Todd. Rachel and Todd were so in love that after just a few weeks of meeting, they were thinking about a future together and having children. Less than a month after they met, he invited she to a party, and then he proposed to her. She was so moved that she agreed immediately. Unfortunately for Tim, although he tried to mend his relationship with her, he was unsuccessful. Rachel informed her family and friends that she is very much in love with Todd, the man of her dreams, who had already proposed to her, and they planned to marry that summer. They had a beautiful wedding, and Rachel took her husband's last name, Winkler. This new chapter opened up opportunities she had only dreamed of. Together, they aimed to build a bright future. She quickly forgot the past that she lived with her ex-boyfriend for more than 10 years, with whom she overcame many different difficulties. A year after the wedding, Rachel became pregnant and she was overjoyed. On April 11, 2007, she and her wealthy husband, Todd, welcomed their daughter, Eva, and she adored her child. A year later, their second child, Ariel, was born. During this time, Rachel stays at home doing housework and taking care of the children while her husband goes to work. In early 2010, their family had big changes, when Todd was accepted as a manager in a prestigious pharmaceutical company 2 hours from their home. As a result, he started working late at his office in Alameda. During this time, the family lived in an area reserved for the extremely wealthy, where each had their own garage to park their personal jet. Feeling tired of her life at home, Rachel took a job as a manager at the nearby airport, a decision Todd supported. In September 2009, when Todd was working away from home, Rachel met a man named James White, who was doing repair work, and they struck up a friendly conversation. Around this time, her relationship with Todd began to deteriorate. The attachment and attraction they once felt for each other had faded. According to Rachel's relatives, she no longer seemed as happy or radiant as before. Todd discovered her relationship with James and was upset that she was spending more time with James, his colleague, than with him. He began to suspect that Rachel was developing feelings for James. Concerned, he sought advice from his father-in-law, Don, who followed the Ozan religion and upheld family values. Don strongly objected of his daughter's behavior, and he and Todd believed she was behaving inappropriately. Don viewed the situation from his own perspective, as a similar experience led his family to fall apart. After that, he spoke face-to-face with his daughter, Rachel, believing he could understand her and save her relationship with Todd. Don explained that he should not have ended things with Diana over affair. A year after his divorce, he reconsidered the situation and realized that he should not have left his wife and children, but should have forgiven his wife. Because of his stubbornness, everyone faced serious difficulties. However, in his case, he could no longer change anything, so he asked his daughter to reconsider and leave James, and she promised to think about it. Despite her father's advice and opposition from Todd and others, Rachel continued to communicate with James, whom she adored. She admitted to her friends that she had fallen in love with James. Todd realized his marriage was crumbling, so he frequently sought advice from Rachel's father, Don, who persuaded him to fight for the marriage. After a while, Rachel realized that her father was right. She also knew that she would not be able to raise her child properly if she continued to have an affair. Therefore, she chose to mend her relationship with Todd. Her father was pleased that she heeded his advice and preserved the family. Todd forgave her, and their relationship improved. A few months later, they announced to friends and family that she is pregnant with her third child. Although he hoped for a son to inherit his business, his wife was content with having a third daughter. In March 2011, the couple left their children with Rachel's father, Don, and went on vacation to Florida to strengthen their relationship. It seemed their relationship had improved, as if they had rekindled their love. Rachel affirms that the child she is pregnant with is Todd's child, but some suspected she might be pregnant by her lover, James. However, not everything was smooth in the family. Behind their family's happy exterior are arguments. After the vacation, they had a big fight, and Todd went to Australia on business, he staying there for some time. He even paid for Don's trip to visit him but didn't invite his wife and children, possibly because the long trip could be difficult for the children and the pregnant Rachel. Alternatively, this might indicate serious issues in their relationship. In Australia, he and Don enjoyed their time, relaxing and having fun almost every evening. Rachel, who had been apart from her husband, Todd, for a long time, occasionally reached out to her first boyfriend, Tim, who was an artist. She shared stories from her life with Tim, such as an incident involving credit cards. Todd had issued several cards in her name and even bought a plane under her name, leaving her with a $50,000 debt. However, Todd quickly paid off the debt, which didn't seem to be a problem for him. It seemed like she was boasting about her wealth. Tim still had feelings for Rachel, and it was difficult for him to hear these stories. But he held on to a small hope that they might get back together. When she was alone with the children and feeling bored, Rachel decided to pursue her ambitions. She returned to work at the airport and sent her children to kindergarten. Her father, Don, disapproved because he was religious and believed that a woman should stay home to care for her children. Additionally, since they were wealthy, there was no financial need for her to work. However, Rachel was determined to continue her career, and eventually, her father relented, allowing her to work and interact with others. During this time, Rachel's former lover, James, started his own business near where she worked. Her father advised her to avoid James to resist any temptation, as he sensed there was more than just friendship between them. James had been married twice, with his second marriage ending in divorce, and he was seeking a new relationship. However, he didn't want to break up another family, so he kept his distance from her. As time went on, the situation evolved. In early June 2010, Rachel called James and said that she was blindly in love with him and that she did not want to live with Todd anymore, which left James confused. Although both were married at the time, but James still loved Rachel, and they began meeting secretly. Rachel's husband, Todd, frequent business trips to Australia, which allowed James and Rachel to meet without obstacles. James even improved his relationship with Rachel's children. The hardest thing for Rachel and James was keeping their relationship a secret from their neighbors. At times, they acted too openly, leading to rumors about their secret affair. Eventually, James couldn't keep the relationship secret any longer and filed for divorce. He confessed to his wife that he loved Rachel. His wife was furious and informed Todd, who became very upset. Todd called Rachel, begged her to end her relationship with James for the sake of their children. Then, Rachel promised she would break up with her lover, James. Despite this promise, Rachel and James continued to meet, but more discreetly. In July 2011, the Winkler family welcomed their third child, a boy, Alex. Even though the child is not James's child, but he loved Rachel deeply and dreamed of a future with her, willing to raise her children. However, Todd eventually discovered that Rachel was still seeing James. This was really a big shock to Todd's. Naturally, Rachel's father disapproved of her actions and he supported Todd. Rachel's father, Don, suggested that Todd meet with James to discuss everything calmly, as rational men should, and Todd agreed. Then, Don and Todd went to James' house. When they arrived, James and his daughter, Caitlin, had just finished target practice. Then, they spoke calmly. Todd explains that he is Rachel's legal husband and he loves her very much. They had children together, and he asked James to stay away from her. James agreed but secretly had no intention of ending his relationship with Rachel. Actually, Rachel and James were planning to start a new life together. Rachel had told James that Todd was being tyrannical and tormenting her, though there was no evidence to support this. She even claimed her third pregnancy was a result of rape. This angered James, and he wanted to help her. In October 2011, Rachel visited her university friends for the weekend. She expressed frustrations about Todd not providing her with money, which forced her to borrow for essentials like diapers and food for the children. She revealed that their house was in urgent need of repair, but Todd had no plans to address this. She felt controlled and manipulated by him. Despite she not wanting a third child, but he forced her. She shared her predicament with at least 3 friends. It seems she is in a difficult situation and does not know how to continue raising her children in such an unhappy family situation. One of Rachel's university friends was a lawyer and offered she advice on marriage and divorce. Rachel plans to manage the family finances and wants to reach a fair separation agreement with Todd. She aimed to secure her share and settle alimony matters peacefully, but he was against the idea of divorce. In November 2011, Rachel stopped making mortgage payments on the house because Todd was not giving her money and was hiding his income from her. She began to suspect that he was planning something against her. On November 11th, she called her lawyer friend and expressed that she was ready to begin the divorce process. While Todd was in Amsterdam on a business trip, followed by a vacation, Rachel began filling out the divorce paperwork in February 2012. During this time, she told her lover, James, that her husband had discovered electronic divorce documents on her laptop and deleted them. To prevent this from happening again, she started filling out the forms by hand. Then Todd having learned about the divorce, but he wants to avoid it. Todd spoke to his father-in-law, Don, about Rachel, claiming she was mentally unstable, which was related to their upcoming divorce. Todd said she smoked, drank, and seemed to be losing weight again. However, Don, who saw his daughter Rachel regularly, didn't notice any issues. Rachel explained that her weight loss was due to the stress from the ongoing divorce. The family situation had become extremely tense and seemed headed for a bad outcome. By February 2012, Todd was severely depressed, which his business partner also observed. Todd's business partner suspected that Todd had mental issues because of the divorce, but he insisted that the problem was with his wife. He was considering having her treated in a psychiatric clinic, claiming she was on a drinking binge, and he needed a break to handle the problems that had come up. This conversation occurred on February 10th. On February 26, 2012, divorce proceedings will begin. Rachel was counting on alimony each month to support her children. She planned to move with the children to James' place and was expecting a court meeting. However, that evening, she never arrived at James' house. On the morning of the 27th, a neighbor saw Todd with the children, and everything seemed normal. Around 10:30 a.m., he left his children with a neighbor temporarily because something terrible had occurred at his home. Todd was awaiting the police and did not want his children to witness the situation. The neighbor observed that Todd appeared calm, had no injuries, and appeared to be just irritable. Then, Todd called 911 to report that 37-year-old Rachel had been killed in their home during a domestic dispute. Police arrived at approximately 10:40 a.m. Todd emerged from the house and told the officers his wife was dead inside the house. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where he agreed to speak with investigators without a lawyer. During the interrogation, he is still very calm. He admitted his wife had been having an affair for a long time and had filed for divorce, seeking full custody of their children. He said his wife made him lose his temper, leading to a violent conflict. He attacked her. But then he stopped when he heard their child crying, realizing the children could witness the altercation, so he moved them to another room. Todd returned to argue with his wife, which escalated. He struck her in the face, causing her to respond with a punch. He began to apologize because he realizing his mistake, but his wife approached with a pair of large scissors and cut his hands several times. They started fighting when he tried to take the scissors from his wife. Immediately after, he poked his wife in the eye with his thumb, which helped him knock the scissors out of her hand. He quickly left there to gather his children and take them to safety. Todd told investigators that he was worried about his wife's condition and behavior. He thought she was drunk and could be a threat to him and the children. When he returned home, he found his wife in the bedroom, sitting on the floor. As he approached her, she kicked him in the face. In a rage, he threw her to the floor and began to strangle her with both hands. However, she grabbed the scissors again, but he quickly took them away and struck her face and neck several times in self-defense. She pleaded with him not to kill her, she also promising to save their marriage, but he couldn't control his anger. He admitted that he forcefully stabbed her neck with the scissors. He confessed that, at that moment, he wanted her dead, although he claimed he didn't intend to kill her and that it happened accidentally. After the incident happened, Todd attempted to revive his wife, but she was already dead. In shock, he attempted to clean the crime scene by washing away the blood, but he realized it was futile and called 911. The detectives doubted his account as there were many inconsistencies. It was absurd that he took the kids to the neighbor's house, while Rachel sat calmly waiting for him to return after the brawl. Why didn't she use the opportunity to escape? At 10:30, Todd took the children to a neighbor and then called the police immediately. The medical examiner concluded that Rachel died 6 hours before his 911 call, which contradicted his entire story. During the autopsy, Rachel was found to have multiple injuries, including broken ribs and numerous abrasions. She had cuts and puncture wounds mostly on her face and neck, with the fatal wound being a penetrating cut to the jugular vein. She bled to death in several minutes and had defensive cuts and injuries on her arms and body, indicating she resisted. She was not drunk, having only consumed a little alcohol. Her injuries indicated a brutal attack. Detectives investigating the case learned of the death of Todd's second wife, Catherine. However, they decided to re-examine the case. Catherine's death was initially ruled as a car accident. However, investigators developed new suspicions and decided to review the case. On the day of Catherine's death, in September 1999, her family had gone for a hike in the forest. Todd was stung by a bee and started having severe allergies. So, he urgently needed medical attention. Then, she drove their pickup truck, while he lay in the back seat, heading towards the closest hospital. Unfortunately, she lost control, causing the vehicle to tumble down a mountain. She died in the crash, but he survived. He managed to get out of the car and sought help. Tourists in the national forest heard the crash and came to help him. Todd claimed that the adrenaline released during the accident cleared up all traces of the allergy, which seemed suspicious from the start. When the police arrived at the accident scene, the entire area was engulfed in flames. Rescuers couldn't immediately descend due to the steep slope. They had to use special equipment and ropes. It was puzzling how Todd managed to climb to the mountain summit without Haya. Despite the hot weather, he was wearing winter clothing, which he blamed on chills and fever from an insect bite. Although he claimed to have been in the car with Catherine, he had no injuries, not even a scratch. This was hard to believe, given the severity of the accident. He explained that he was thrown from the pickup truck and his winter clothes protected him. He couldn't remember the location of the insect bite due to fear, and doctors found no evidence of a bite. He believed Catherine was driving too fast, which caused her to lose control. Catherine's autopsy revealed that smoke inhalation and thermal burns caused her death. Her body was completely burned, making it difficult to determine the extent of her injuries. Additionally, a medical examination found no signs of foul play. After an investigation, the death of Todd's second wife, Catherine, was ruled an accident. Todd received over $1 million from her life insurance policy. Following her death, he cut all ties with her friends and relatives, who suspected him of staging her death for financial gain. They thought his story was too implausible, and their suspicions strengthened when they learned about Rachel's death, they believing Catherine had been murdered. In October 2012, Todd Winkler was on trial for murdering Rachel. His story changed with each interrogation, similar to his inconsistencies after Catherine's death. It is believed that he planned Rachel's murder very carefully. At that time, Rachel's father, Don Hatfield, was granted full custody of her child. He saw this as a chance to make up for past mistakes and to rebuild the family he had once destroyed. Don believed that Todd killed Rachel not because of her affair, nor because of their impending divorce, but because she knew his secrets and had threatened to expose them, so he silenced her permanently. According to relatives, Todd had been violent towards Rachel's in the past. For instance, her brother witnessed Todd attack her on she by the defendant in a San Diego bar in 2006. She also told her relatives that if anything bad happened to her, it would be because of her husband. She felt he was dangerous. Rachel's eldest daughter shared a noteworthy family incident. One day, Rachel discovered a box containing the ashes of Catherine in a closet. She remarked that she hoped she would never become ashes, and he responded by saying that she should just never make him angry. This exchange left the daughters and Rachel feeling uneasy. During the trial, it was revealed that Todd had previously attempted to harm Rachel. While they were scuba diving on vacation in Florida, he supposedly left her alone, causing Rachel to struggle to reach the boat and almost drown. Later, he reportedly tried to push her off a motorcycle. However, these accounts were unverified and based on stories Rachel told her friends, which she often exaggerated. It was confirmed that Todd had mental disorders, diagnosed with dissociative and conversion disorder, which can cause a break from reality. Despite this, psychiatrists considered him mentally fit. Then, he emphasized his mental health issues to try to lessen his sentence. One day in court, he even feigned psychosis, but this tactic failed. The prosecution argued that Todd committed a premeditated murder. According to the prosecutor, he took scissors, entered the bedroom while his wife was asleep, and killed her. He then had 6 hours to stage a fight, inflict defensive wounds on himself, bandage those wounds, eliminate unnecessary evidence, feed the children, and take them to a neighbor. Only after doing all this did he call 911. Blood stains found on the children's food plates showed that he had prepared breakfast for them after killing their mother. Later, Todd admitted that he did not call emergency services immediately. The timeline he provided did not match the facts. He claimed he took the children to a neighbor before killing his wife and calling for help, but his wife had already been dead for several hours. Additionally, he would not have had enough time to bandage his hands so quickly and precisely. On the other hand, the defense lawyer argued that the murder was an act of self-defense. Rachel was the one who attacked her husband first. She first grabbed the scissors and attacked him. A struggle ensued, and he realized it was a matter of life or death, choosing to save himself. The jury deliberated for 13 days on the case details and testimonies before reaching a guilty verdict. They convicted 47-year-old Todd Winkler of first-degree murder. In December 2014, he was sentenced to 26 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in June 2031, when he will be 64 years old. Todd has filed many appeals, but all of which have been rejected. However, he has managed to secure better conditions for himself in prison. He is serving his sentence at San Quentin State Prison in California. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Martin Durham. Martin Durham was born in 1969 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was an ordinary child and lived in good conditions, all around his natural beauty. In addition, he loved fishing and hiking, capturing photos along the way. He usually took a tent and a hiking backpack to enjoy a few days in the fresh air, he often accompanied by an older cousin. At 17, Martin met his first love, Glenna Johnson, who was a year older. They live in the same area and attended the same school. Their romance was brief, leading to a quick breakup, but they got back together and broke up many times. They shared many interests and could not stay apart for long. Despite their similarities, but they ultimately decided to end the relationship and go their separate ways. For a long time, they neither saw nor communicated with each other. During this period, Martin met another woman, Christine Keller, and he quickly fell in love with her. The two of them get along very well and then they soon moved in together. After a short time of dating, he realized that she would be an ideal life partner, and they should build a stronger relationship. In the following years, Christine and Martin married and moved into a house given to them by their parents, located in a quiet residential area of the city. Over the next few years, they had 2 sons and a daughter. Christine focused on managing the home and caring for the children, while Martin worked to support the family. In addition to his main job repairing cars, he also worked at a restaurant in the city of Vlaam. Despite this, the early years of their marriage were challenging, especially because their children were born close in age. So, they had many difficulties in taking care of their young children. They slept little and were often exhausted, leading to frequent arguments. However, they were determined to overcome these difficulties. Martin was a devoted father and made every effort to support his family. Many people saw him as a role model. In March 1995, Martin's family faced a tragedy when a truck ran a red light and collided with his car. The truck dragged his car along the road, crushing both Martin and the driver. Martin suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, a broken jaw, broken legs, and a traumatic brain injury that severely damaged a large part of his brain. Doctors tried their best to save him, but he was in a coma for months. Then, he underwent multiple surgeries and slowly began to recover. However, Martin's difficulties were not over. It took a long time for him to return to his normal life. He had to relearn basic movements, like sitting up and holding his head, before progressing to more complex ones. The accident left his face disfigured, and he lost some brain functions. Despite the difficulties, he tried to overcome them and return to a normal life with his family. He spent a long time moving around in a wheelchair before transitioning to crutches. Although he gradually overcame the physical effects of the accident, he remained psychologically affected. Martin could no longer work as an auto mechanic to support his family, and he encountered many physical limitations that turned his life upside down. The hardest thing for him was not being able to maintain the active lifestyle he had before. He loved camping, fishing, and traveling, but now he was bedridden and just hang around the house. Every movement caused him severe pain, which only the strongest painkillers could help manage. According to doctors, these effects would persist throughout his life. This challenging time affected not only Martin, who survived the accident, but also his family. His wife, Christine, previously managed only the children and household chores, but now she had to handle the family's finances. She was compelled to enroll the children in daycare and find a job to support them, in addition to caring for her sick husband. Fortunately, her close relatives pitched in to help. With their support, Christine was able to manage all the difficulties. However, Martin also became aggressive and hostile towards his wife. In addition, he also lost his memory. He cannot remember much about his past, including family events, and sometimes forgot his children's names. Longtime friends and acquaintances became strangers to him. He was isolated because he did not communicate well with people due to severe memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and confusion. This makes him cold and looked down upon. Martin often retreated into his own thoughts, which he kept to himself. Meanwhile, he was recovering from injuries and regularly attended physiotherapy, sometimes staying in the hospital for treatment. He switched doctors several times, but fortunately, his physical condition gradually improved. However, he was still tormented by the psychological aftermath of his trauma. At the same time, Martin constantly controls the family's spending and criticized his wife's financial management. This made their relationship more and more strained. This was a very difficult time for the young family. Martin went through a difficult process of dealing with trauma and psychological problems, but was unable to overcome them. Some issues made him angry, and he often lost his temper with his wife without justification. Christine did her best to accept the changes in her husband's behavior, but eventually, she felt she couldn't take it anymore. Years after the accident, Christine filed for divorce. Later, she admitted that she didn't want to do it, but she couldn't stand Martin any longer. The divorce was a major blow to Martin. He felt resentment and disappointment for a long time. Some time passed, he was able to regain his spirits. He received a large insurance payout for the accident, which he used to buy real estate and purchase another house. In addition, Martin was also paid a monthly sum by his insurance company as compensation for the accident during his recovery. Thanks to this, he was able to continue his life and take care of himself without financial hardship. After that, Martin moved to his new house with the parrot that Christine loved so much. She had left the bird with he to keep him company and prevent loneliness. The bird, a 15-year-old African gray parrot named Bat, was quite old. This new house is located in Sand Lake, not far from his previous house. He had big plans to recover as soon as possible, so he could return to normal life for the sake of his children. Martin quickly settled into his new place. He kept in regular contact with his children, and even his relationship with his ex-wife Christine improved. She noticed that he finally had an interest in life and enjoyed spending time in the backyard. He discovered his talent for design on his own, and this was soon recognized by others. Neighbors frequently sought his help for designing private gardens and lawn care. This job has helped him earn more income and gain confidence in dealing with life's difficulties and helping him improve his health. Doctors have observed a steady improvement in his condition and has a positive direction. Although Martin's health and mood have improved significantly. But Christine still hesitated to return to him. She is afraid that old problems may return. She kept her distance, maintained contact, and brought the children to visit. By chance, Martin reconnected with his first love, Glenna Johnson, who had also recently divorced. They rekindled old feelings and began a romantic relationship. Glenna eventually moved in with Martin. Glenna's children remained with her ex-husband, but she still visits them regularly. Martin's children also visited from time to time. Glenna and Martin enjoy activities such as fishing, hunting, and hiking. She assisted with his physical limitations during these times. However, it was challenging, so they often opted for walks in the area or visits to the casino, which they loved in their youth. These casino visits have become a monthly routine for them, where they tested their luck. They became well known in the local community, often invite friends and acquaintances over to play poker, backyard barbecues, and generally forming a harmonious partnership. It seems they have found each other again and are happy together. In the summer of 2005, Glenna and Martin decided to get married. Everything appeared fine, but their closest friends knew there were underlying issues in the seemingly perfect relationship. After the accident, Martin changed, he becoming more short-tempered and demanding. He tried to control Glenna and disliked when she did things without him or left him alone for errands. He tries to manage all their finances, which caused problems. She tried to manage family problems by himself, but he was suspicious that she was not entirely honest, spending excessively on unnecessary items. During this time, he continued to receive disability benefits, and his wife took on guardianship, but she had one weakness. Glenna was a gambler and spent a lot of money on it. She visited the casino much more often than her husband, without him knowing, and she losing a lot of money. Additionally, there were issues between Glenna and his ex-wife, Christine. Apparently, Martin frequently complained about Christine, accusing her of leaving him during a tough time after the accident, but he didn't talk about how he made Christine's life unbearable. Christine tolerated him for 2 years before leaving, but she continued to support him as much as she could. Christine kept in touch with Martin's and brought the children to visit he. However, he spoke negatively about Christine to his new wife, Glenna. Plus, Glenna also expressed that she absolutely does not like the children of Martin and Christine. This made Christine and her children feel uncomfortable, to the point where they didn't want to visit Martin when Glenna was there. They disliked hearing unpleasant things about their mother, Christine, and she supported their decision by not bringing them to their father. Martin became angry with his ex-wife and constantly quarreled with her. This led to tension with the children and Glenna. Overall, the relationships deteriorated, and everyone's behavior only worsened the situation. A clear testament to Glenna's deep love for Martin is the tattoo of his name on the back of her hand, which she got 18 years ago when they were dating. She never removed it, likely because she had strong emotions for him all these years. She has still loved him for the past 15 years and waited for the moment they would be together again. However, within the family, the relationship was far from romantic, with frequent disputes over money. Martin suspected Glenna was overspending and debt piled up. She often took money from him without his knowledge. Over time, she took complete control of the family's finances, further straining their relationship. Glenna began using the check from the insurance company that Martin received every month as an allowance. In addition, she also illegally traded in some strong drugs. At the time of the accident, Martin did not take these medications regularly, resulting in a large amount of medication being left unused. Glenna sold these medications secretly. However, his involvement in this activity remains unclear. Some believe he was complicit in the sale, help him earn extra income while he is recovering from a traffic accident and is struggling financially. But there are also those who oppose this theory, who believe that Glenna sold the remaining amount of medicine without telling him. Even though Glenna and Martin's relationship was having problems, they persisted in a toxic relationship for over 11 years. By 2015, they still acted friendly and were always seen together, but they no longer concealed their failing marriage. Occasionally, the discontent between them led to increasingly frequent scandals. One of Glenna's friends later claimed to have witnessed their breakup, during which Glenna threatened to kill Martin. Despite this, they mostly maintained the appearance of an ideal couple, walking hand in hand as they did at the start of their relationship in their youth. By May 2015, the issue of divorce had become serious. One morning that May, Christine, Martin's ex-wife, discovered that Martin was selling his house. She found an advertisement on an auction site and was very surprised. She immediately called Martin to ask why he suddenly wanted to sell a house he loved so much, where he devoted his love to creating his garden. However, he was unaware of this sale, so he asked his current wife, Glenna, about it. Glenna claimed it was a mistake and said she would resolve it, but the fact is she didn't solve it. Previously, their car had been repossessed due to debts, and Glenna had similarly assured Martin it was a mistake and she would fix it, but nothing changed. The auction for the house was scheduled for 3 weeks later, by the end of the month. Perhaps due to the debt accumulated during their marriage, and Glenna wanted to sell the house to pay off the debt, but she did not want to tell Martin about this. On May 13, 2015, one of Martin's neighbors visited him early in the morning to discuss some routine matters. The neighbor was surprised when no one responded to his knock, as Martin usually kept his door open at that time. Concerned, the neighbor entered the house and called out to Martin and Glenna, but no one replied. Venturing further inside, he discovered the reason for the silence. In their bedroom, he found Martin lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and next to it is Glenna, who was bleeding heavily from the head. Terrified that the perpetrator might still be around, the neighbor fled from the scene and immediately called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they realized that Martin was lifeless. Martin was lying on his side, wearing only his underwear, his body already cold, and the doctors confirmed that the 46-year-old had died several hours earlier. However, Glenna was still alive and even conscious. She tried to say something. She managed to utter a fragmented sentence that was not understood. Glenna was found lying next to Martin, fully clothed. However, she could not provide any useful information about the incident. She was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. A bullet had grazed her skull without damaging the brain, so her injuries were not severe. She recovered quickly after surgery at the clinic. Detectives were able to question her soon after, but she was still undergoing treatment, and they had other cases to handle. The investigators tried to piece together the sequence of incident by examining the crime scene thoroughly. It did not appear to be a robbery, because valuables or personal items in the house are not lost. Even the money, left in a visible spot, was untouched. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Glenna and Martin might have known the attacker and let him in. During this time, police discovered that Martin was taking strong painkillers and Glenna involved in selling them. There was then an assumption that it was that trade that may have triggered the attack. The entire scheme of selling medicines was uncovered, and detectives believe there may have been a conflict with the buyer during the transfer process. However, by that time, forensic experts had already examined and analyzed the crime scene, including the bullets and weapons found in the house. The pistol was later tested and confirmed to be the murder weapon. In fact, this pistol has belonged to Martin for many years, but both of them were shot with it. First, the attacker must enter the house, know exactly where the weapon is and retrieve it. Then he finds the magazine, loads the gun and then starts shooting. This plan seemed too complicated and therefore unlikely. Moreover, during a more thorough search of the bathroom, Martin's painkillers was found and had not been stolen, which ruled out the possibility of selling them and ruled out the motive for the crime being an attack by the buyer. The weapon used to kill Martin was found under the sofa in the living room. There is a lot of blood there, which did not match the location where the body was found. Apparently an attack also took place in the living room, a shooting, and then the shooting continued in the bedroom. Martin might have been shot in the living room, and then the body moved, but why was this done? It seemed this was done intentionally, perhaps to stage the crime and mislead the investigation. This assumption was confirmed when a spent cartridge case was found in the living room, indicating that the shooting occurred there. As the investigation progressed, more questions surfaced. Blood samples from different rooms were analyzed, revealing unexpected results. The analysis showed that all shots fired at Martin happened in the bedroom. His blood was not present in the living room, and there were no signs of his body being moved. The blood found in the living room belonged solely to Glenna, who was discovered in the bedroom. The bullet casing found in the living room corresponded to the shot that hit her head, supporting this theory. But how did she manage to reach the bedroom after this injury? Medical experts informed the police that this scenario was possible because Glenna's injury was less severe than initially thought. She could have reached the bedroom by herself, especially since she was conscious when found. Nonetheless, the situation appeared unusual. From then on, the police began to suspect that Glenna fired at her husband and then injured herself to divert suspicion. However, these theories still needed solid evidence. At this time, the police were unable to interview Glenna, as she was still in the hospital undergoing treatment and recovery. They took her mobile phone for investigation. Through this, detectives discovered that their family was experiencing a severe financial crisis. Just the day before Martin's death, she searched online for how to use the Uger 6 pistol, the same gun involved in Martin's death and her own head wound. Police found 2 farewell letters, in which Glenna apologized to her children for what she was about to do. She also said goodbye to everyone, indicating her plan to end her life. The Supreme Court identified Glenna's as the perpetrator of the crime. Based on all the collected evidence, the investigation was reopened, but something compelled her to shoot her husband first. Martin was killed in the bedroom, and Glenna shot herself in the head in the living room. However, unlike Martin, she did not die instantly and managed to reach the marital bedroom. This can be clarified by talking to her, so the police waited until they could interview her. They continued gathering evidence in the meantime. Martin's family was already convinced that they were not attacked by a stranger, the shooter was his wife, Glenna. Christine Keller, the ex-wife of Martin, was shocked by the events. Although she never thought highly of Glenna, especially because of Glenna's aggressive behavior, but she did not expect this to happen. Then, Christine took her old parrot home to the children. Meanwhile, detectives were finally able to speak with Glenna, who was feeling well. Doctors confirmed that she understood what was happening around her and ready to talk to the detectives. Despite the doctor's positive assessment. But she told the investigators that, in her view, she never wrote farewell letters and did not plan to end her life, let alone kill her husband. Police officers were concerned because Glenna completely denied being involved in the attack on her husband, yet she also claimed she couldn't remember what happened on that tragic day. This inconsistency seemed suspicious and hinted that she might be a suspect, but at that time, they had no solid evidence against her. Glenna was released from the hospital several months later. Meanwhile, the investigation had not uncovered any new evidence. Police were concerned that Glenna's denials and the trauma she had suffered might convince a jury that she was innocent. One day, Christine was awakened by the parrot's voice and went to see it. She was amazed by what it was saying. She decided to use her phone to record the monologue. The parrot kept repeating, "It says, beg Glenna, don't shoot him." This caused Christine's great shock and fear. For a while afterwards, she was even haunted by nightmares. She immediately informed the police and later showed them the video recording. Although the use of a parrot as a witness in court was unprecedented, from that moment on, all of the detectives' suspicions about Glenna's involvement in the case were confirmed. New details of the case have attracted widespread public and media attention. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The incident was again in the news at the end of June 2016 when police arrested Glenna. They had been collecting evidence to piece together a full case that would clearly show the jury who the killer was and help the Martin family get justice. It was initially thought that the footage of the parrot accusing Glenna would not be used, as it might seem too provocative, and it was uncertain how the jury would react to it. The prosecutor argued that Glenna was in severe financial trouble and could not admit her gambling failures to her spouse. For a long time before the murder, she neglected to pay bills because all her money went to cover debts from her gambling addiction. Eventually, she decided to end her life, writing 2 letters, one to her husband and one to the children. This suggested that Glenna did not initially plan to harm her husband, but something went awry. The final straw was the failed sale of the family home, which was put up for auction without her husband's knowledge. When Martin found out about this from Christine, he likely confronted Glenna. A fierce argument may have ensued, leading her to kill him in a fit of rage before deciding to end her life. Glenna and her lawyer claimed that she had no memory of the shooting or the letter and insisted that she loved her husband too much, so she can't hurt him. They presented a list of medications she was taking to improve cognitive function as evidence of her mental condition. She also denied searching online for how to use a gun, stating that she only used her phone for games and calls. The trial lasted 10 days. The prosecution believed it had a strong case to persuade the jury. However, the jury seemed uncertain, due to the largely circumstantial evidence. Then, a video of the parrot's words was introduced as a crucial piece of evidence. Experts say the parrots form a close relationship with their owner, Martin, and they learn to imitate Martin's voice. Most experts agree that those words left a strong and deep impression on the parrot's memory, so it repeated them over and over again. In the end, this evidence was effective. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found 49 years old, Glenna guilty. In this case, the parrot played an important role as a witness, contributing to finding justice. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Emma Jangestig. Arboga, a small town in Sweden about 160 kilometers west of Stockholm, experienced a crime in 2008 that remains one of the most shocking in the country. On March 17, 2008, a 20-year-old mother of two, Emma Jangestig, was spending the evening with her children. Her eldest, Max, was 3 years old, and her youngest, Saga, was 1.5. Emma was preparing dinner while waiting for her fiancé, Torg Hellberg, who was still at work and expected to return in a few hours. Emma had been divorced for a year when she met Torg. They quickly developed a relationship and moved in together. The couple bought a house. This move took place just 2 months before the tragedy. Although Torg was not the biological father of Emma's children, he cared for them as if they were his own. It seemed that Emma had found the perfect partner to build a complete family and raise her children. Nicholas, the biological father of Max and Saga, maintained contact with the kids. He had a reserved relationship with his ex-wife, Emma, but spoke with the children almost every day. Around 6 p.m., Emma and the children sat down for dinner. Torg couldn't join them this time because he was working late, but he said he would be home soon. While waiting, Emma decided to use the time to message her family and friends. She used a messaging app to chat with her sister, and their conversation continued smoothly until her sister received the last message at 19:07. Suddenly, their dialogue stopped abruptly in the middle of a sentence. Emma didn't read more messages or respond, which seemed odd. Her sister found this strange, so she contacted Torg and expressed her concern about Emma's unusual behavior and lack of response. As it turned out, Torg was free earlier than expected and was already walking home. He assured Emma's sister that he would check on the situation. Torg arrived at the house at 19:17. Everything seemed normal from the outside. But he noticed the front door was open, which was unusual since it was usually locked. Sensing something was wrong, Torg cautiously entered the house and was met with a shocking sight. The corridor was in complete disarray, items were scattered on the floor, and some pieces of furniture were broken. Initially, he couldn't understand what had happened and thought it might be a children's game that had gotten out of hand. However, he soon realized that the extent of the chaos was too severe for children to have caused it, and Emma would not have allowed it. He called out to all the household members by name several times, but there was no response. Suddenly, at the end of the hallway, Torg noticed a suspicious figure on the floor. As he approached, he was horrified. He saw a small body lying in an unusual position with many cuts on its face and head. Emma lay next to it, her body covered in blood. Realizing he needed to act quickly, Torg called the police at 7:20 p.m. The police received the call from Torg, a distressed man who was desperately calling for help. He explained that someone had attacked his family while he was away. In the background, a woman's moans could be heard. The police quickly dispatched police and ambulance services to the location. Doctors arrived within minutes. By then, Torg had discovered that all 3 family members had suffered severe head injuries, so severe that they were unrecognizable. To their surprise, doctors discovered that all of the victims were still alive and breathing. Everyone was immediately taken to the hospital for emergency care. Max and Saga were in critical condition, while Emma's injuries were slightly less severe. Her was placed in intensive care and put into a medically induced coma. Doctors predicted from the start that even if the children and mother survived, the brain injuries they suffered would likely have long-term effects on their lives. Doctors battled to save the victims. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the scene of the horrific attack, which looked like a scene from a horror movie. The area was cordoned off for a thorough examination due to the severe chaos inside the house. Unfortunately, the medical team left many traces while providing aid and transporting the victims, which led to displaced objects and lost evidence. The attack clearly happened within a 13-minute window between 1907, when Emma's sister received her last message, and Torg's emergency call at 1920. Initially, Torg, the head of the family, was suspected. However, he had a solid alibi as surveillance cameras had captured him on his way home, thus eliminating him from the suspect list. With the time intervals clarified, it became clear that he was telling the truth. This indicated that the attacker had only a 10-minute window between 1907 and 1917, when Torg entered the house and found the wounded family members. Although Torg was no longer a suspect, the police decided to speak with him again at the station. They assumed he might have seen or heard something important for the investigation. However, he insisted that he did not see any strangers or cars. The only thing that seemed suspicious to him was the unlocked door of the house. Police then suspected Emma's ex-husband Nicholas as a potential suspect. Torg explained that Nicholas had constant conflicts with Emma over communication about the children, division of assets and alimony. These issues escalated at times, and she even went to the police because she feared for her safety. However, this was long before the tragedy. Eventually, they reached an agreement and everything was resolved. The police are working hard at the crime scene to gather more information. The perpetrator could be someone close to Emma. Looking at the level of attacks on the victims, it seems that there was a personal motive. Whoever this person was, they harbored a deep hatred for the victims, lost control during the killing process, and caused many injuries. At the time, Emma's ex-husband Nicholas was the prime suspect. Due to previous conflicts with Emma, he even threatened her, prompting her to contact the police. He was later arrested and questioned. Nicholas was shocked by the incident but calmly answered police questions. He had an alibi for the time of the attack, as he was in another city. Although the alibi has not been verified, his behavior suggests that he is not the killer. The police's only hope is 3-year-old Saga, who is still fighting for her life in hospital. If she survives, she could be the police's only witness, providing vital information about who the killer is. The victim's family fear the attacker may return to harm Saga again. To protect her, 24-hour security has been deployed to the hospital. She is in critical condition and doctors believe that even if she survives, she may be permanently disabled and might not remember the attack. No other witnesses to the attack could be found. The neighbors neither saw nor heard anything, so the police started reviewing the surveillance cameras in the area. They hoped to track the attacker and determine his origin. It was also crucial to find the murder weapon, which might have traces of the criminal. Therefore, patrol officers carefully examined the area and even used search dogs, but unfortunately, this yielded no results. Forensic experts found that the children had been attacked with a heavy object, such as a hammer or similar tool. The children had been hit with such force that their skulls had been fractured. Each child had been hit multiple times, indicating the intensity of the attacker's rage. This behavior was an important clue. However, it is not possible to identify anyone capable of doing so. The young family had no connections to the criminal world and no enemies. They were known to be good people. The police quickly confirmed their suspicions of a personal motive, as nothing was stolen from the crime scene. Valuables and money were still present, indicating it wasn't a robbery. The forensic examination of the house concluded the day after the murder. By then, Nicholas was removed from the list of suspects because his alibi was verified, and he was released. Emma is still in a coma and the investigation is making no progress. The case attracted considerable media attention. The area had a low crime rate, and the choice of victims and the level of cruelty were shocking. Police contacted local people through the media, which aroused the interest of those living near Emma's house. A passerby reported seeing a man dressed in black with a hood standing hesitantly in the doorway of the house at around 7 p.m. About 5 to 10 minutes later, the same witness, returning from the shop, saw a suspiciously frail man dressed in black run out of the house, get into a car and drive away immediately. He did not get a good look at the person and could not describe the car, but he thought the driver might be a woman disguised as a man. Several other witnesses later gave similar descriptions of a man in the area. It was clear that the man dressed in black was the suspect before the attack. A man then went to the police and reported his ex-girlfriend, expressing concern about her recent inappropriate behavior. She was identified as Christina Schurrer, 31, born in Hanover, Germany. When she was 11, her father left the family and they had limited contact after that. Christina then moved to New York and lived with relatives in Manhattan. After returning to Germany, Christina settled in Göttingen, where for the next 6 years she studied history. She then went to Greece and participated in RASP. While in Athens, she worked at a hotel and as a historian. Later, she moved to Crete and worked in another hotel. In August 2006, Torg, a 20-year-old trader, vacationed on Crete and stayed at Christina's hotel. On his first day there, he met Christina, and they began a romance. They spent 5 days together on his vacation and continued to correspond after he left. Christina later visited him in Sweden, where they spent several days together. After her visit, she suggested going skiing, but he was not interested. Torg admitted that during this time, he noticed that Christina seemed very different than when she was on vacation, and he felt suspicious about their relationship. In January, he told Christina that their relationship was over, but she couldn't accept it calmly and tried everything to fix it. She kept messaging him, urging him to reconsider and get back together. In March 2007, she visited Sweden for 2 weeks and convinced Torg to have dinner with her. He agreed, but during the meeting, he made it clear that they could only be friends. Christina accepted this and left, but after some time, she returned to Sweden again, insisting on a new meeting, considering that this should be the last dinner together at which they would clear things up. During this meeting, she suggested giving their relationship another chance, but Torg firmly refused, as he believed the matter was settled. Christina informed the Torg that, since they would no longer be in a relationship, she wanted to visit him to collect some items she forgot during a previous visit. Torg agreed to her request. After a brief visit, Christina left. However, the next day, she called again asking for help because she got lost near a castle. The Torg went to find her, and when he did, she admitted that she had taken a large dose of drugs the previous night, intending to end her life due to their breakup. Feeling compassionate, Torg allowed her to stay the night. He contacted her family in Germany to express concern over Christina's situation, informing them about her mental health issues and suggesting they admit her to a psychiatric hospital. Torg was confident that she needed help and hoped treatment would resolve her obsessive behavior. Additionally, he felt she would be far enough away not to disturb him anymore. Her family arranged for her to stay in a psychiatric clinic for 3 weeks. Unfortunately, even this did not stop her. In the summer of 2007, she moved to Stockholm with the intention of staying long-term. Christina rented a house and began looking for work. It was later discovered that in January 2008, she went to Germany but returned on February 20th. After her return, she wrote to Torg, saying that she had given birth to his son. Christina also revealed that she had given the child up for adoption due to her mental health problems. This caused confusion for Torg, as he did not know about her pregnancy. Christina mentioned that she had just gone on a business trip to Germany and that their child might have a genetic blood disease. She said that if the doctor's answer was confirmed, the adoptive parents would contact Torg to discuss the matter. Torg was confused by this. At the time, he was in a serious relationship with Emma and they lived together with her children. In January 2008, they moved into a new house. Emma knew about Christina's problems and the story of her son. Emma was skeptical and asked in question, which hospital was the child born in? She wanted to verify this information to avoid any problems, but Christina could not answer. It seemed that she was lying. After some time, Tord received a call from a stranger claiming to be the adoptive father of Christina's son. He confirmed what Christina had said and confirmed that Tord was the biological father of the child. The entire situation seemed unbelievable. It appeared that someone Christina knew had contacted Tord at her request, trying to manipulate the situation. At this point, Tord and Emma both believed the story of the child to be a fabrication. Christina could not provide any evidence of her son's existence. Police began investigating the possibility that Christina had been involved in the murder of Emma and her two children. She had been near Emma's home on the day of the murder before quickly leaving for Germany. To solve these problems, cooperation between the Swedish and German police was needed. On March 20th, a warrant was issued for Christina's arrest. The media quickly reported that Christina had been found in Hanover. Upon hearing the news, her mother and brother contacted the police, asking why Christina was a suspect. The police explained their suspicions of her involvement in a violent attack, which shocked her mother. Christina then called the police herself, claiming it was a misunderstanding and denying any involvement. However, she was arrested after speaking with the police. Christina requested an attorney, and her attorney found an error in the arrest warrant, which led to her release. However, Christina was rearrested 24 hours later. Throughout her interrogation, Christina maintained her innocence. When police searched her rented apartment, they confiscated her cell phone, laptop, and the clothing she was believed to have been wearing on the day of the murder. Christina claimed she was wearing a beige jacket, but witnesses said they saw her wearing a black jacket. The black jacket found during the search was clean and bloodless, suggesting it may have been a different item of clothing. The key evidence was found in search queries on Christina's laptop, which had many photos of Emma and her children and a blueprint of their home. This showed that Christina was planning the crime. Just before the attack, she looked up ways to hide evidence of a crime. She also repeatedly checked Tord's social media pages, demonstrating her intense obsession with him, along with diary entries detailing her victims, including their addresses and habits. On March 27th, Emma emerged from her coma. She was recognizable, much to the relief of her family. Police prepared for a crucial interview when Emma was able to communicate clearly, taking care not to mention her children to protect her mental state and ensure accurate responses. On April 1st, just 3 days after waking from her coma, Emma had her first meeting with the police. Despite her efforts to remember, she did not understand the police's questions or why she was in the hospital. Doctors hoped that her memory would improve over time. Emma asked more and more about her children. After her first interview, a doctor briefed her about the attack but did not go into detail. However, by the next morning, Emma had forgotten the conversation, a situation that lasted for weeks. Because of her fragile condition, officials chose to provide only vague answers about her children and prevented her from accessing newspapers or TV. This restriction frustrated her further, as she couldn't understand the situation. She continued to believe her children were alive, despite her initial memory lapses. Finally, after a conversation with a doctor, she realized that she would never see her children again, but she still could not remember what had happened. She believed that she had been in a serious accident. At this time, forensic experts did not find any of Christina's DNA or fingerprints in Emma's house. It is possible that Christina's attempt to stage the murder was successful. Additionally, they were unable to find a murder weapon. In March, Christina's roommate reported to the police that a hammer had gone missing from her toolbox. The hammer matched the description of the murder weapon, indirectly linking Christina to the crime. However, without strong evidence to charge, the investigation continued. Police focused on shoe prints found at the scene of the children's murders. Several other footprints, belonging to the paramedics, the three victims, and Torg, were not involved and were discarded. However, police did identify prints from sneakers not worn by family members or police. They identified the brand, style, and size that Christina had worn. A photo on her personal page showed her wearing the same pair of sneakers, in the same size, but this evidence remained circumstantial. Video surveillance recordings from the railway station provided significant evidence, showing that Christina, wearing her jacket, visited the city at least 3 times in the week before the attack. Her last visit was on the day of the murder, March 17. Although the images were unclear, her identity was confirmed through mobile phone geolocation. When questioned, Christina could not clearly explain her presence in the city. She later stated that she was there for work. Police were able to determine the motive for the attack when they found notes on Christina's computer that revealed her intense jealousy of Emma, as Christina struggled to accept that Torg had found happiness with someone else. A psychological examination determined that Christina was sane. The police continued to make every effort to help the Emma, who miraculously survived, regain her memory. They even accompanied her to the crime scene, but this did not assist. Then, a few days later, there was an unexpected breakthrough. Emma suddenly recalled that on the evening of March 17, someone had knocked on the door. The Emma opened it to find a girl in dark clothes and a hood standing there. The stranger introduced herself as Christina and immediately struck Emma on the head with a heavy object. It is frightening to think about what happened next in the house and what the defenseless children went through. On July 29, 2008, Christina Scherer appeared in court in Sweden, charged with double murder and attempted murder. Her defense team remained hopeful, considering the evidence against her circumstantial and easily dismissed. However, Christina's strange behavior complicated matters. She waved and smiled inappropriately at those present in court, behavior that supported the prosecutor's portrayal of her as cruel. Christina said her visit to the city was for work. The prosecution, on the other hand, argued that she had come to the city with the intention of killing. They claimed that she had been there twice before, on March 12 and 14, to check out her targets. Furthermore, they portrayed Christina as a pathological liar obsessed with her ex-partner. There was no evidence that she had ever been pregnant or had children. No witnesses saw her pregnant, and there were no maternity records showing that she had given birth or adopted a child. This undermined her claim of having children, casting doubt on her credibility. The key witness for the prosecution was Emma, who identified Christina on the first day of the hearing. She recalled that about 10 minutes before returning from work, she opened the door and encountered the person who had killed her children. Emma was so shocked to see the killer that she fainted in the courtroom. This incident was significant because it confirmed that Emma had not been exposed to any information about the suspect or the crime prior to that moment, which strengthened the prosecution's case. The defense focused on the fact that all the evidence against Christina was circumstantial. They pointed out that the murder weapon didn't have her fingerprints, and there was no DNA evidence linking her to the crime. The prosecutors highlighted blurry surveillance footage and a sneaker print, suggesting that doctors may have inadvertently destroyed important evidence. Additionally, one witness recalled seeing Christina near the crime scene, which supported her presence close to Emma's house, where another witness identified the attacker. Christina could not explain her internet searches in relation to the evidence cover-up, nor why she had photos of Emma and the children, along with a diagram of Emma's house. On August 26, the jury found Christina Scherer guilty of double murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In addition, the court ordered her to pay Emma 100,000 crowns, or about $10,000. Christina's attorney immediately appealed the decision, but the appeal was denied. It is expected that if Christina is ever released from prison, she will be deported to Germany and permanently barred from returning to Sweden. In 2012, she was transferred to a women's prison in Fay, Germany, at her request. She continues to seek to overturn the court's decision and insists on her innocence, attempting to obtain a new trial. Emma is still dealing with the physical and mental effects of her injuries. Throughout this time, Torg has been a strong support, and they eventually married. They later had 2 children together. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Assunta Botera. Rosario Porto and her husband, Alfonso Botera, were wealthy individuals. Rosario's father served as an influential French consul, and her mother was an art teacher. Rosario followed in his father's footsteps. She became a successful lawyer. In 1997, she was appointed French consul. She inherited this post from her father. Alfonso was a well-known journalist. He and Rosario married in 1996 and they moved to a large apartment in an upscale area of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Rosario had lupus erythematosus, which led doctors to advise against pregnancy. They decided to adopt a child abandoned by his parents and create a loving home for him. Adoption was challenging in Spain, so when they were in their early 30s, they chose to go to China for adoption. After navigating numerous bureaucratic hurdles, they arrived at an orphanage. Rosario immediately noticed a 9-month-old girl, and within 2 weeks, they resolved all issues to officially adopt her. When returning to Spain, the child's documents named her Assunta Fon Yan. This was notable since Assunta was among the first Chinese children adopted in the area. Initially, it seemed fortunate for her to join a respected and wealthy family, but unfortunately, this joy did not last long. Assunta was a highly capable girl. She excelled academically, studied multiple languages, practiced ballet, and attended music school. It seems that Rosario and Alfonso want to give her every opportunity to develop. On July 4, 2013, Rosario and her 12-year-old daughter, Assunta, went to the beach to cool off on a hot day. Assunta told a terrifying story about a man wearing a black mask and gloves who tried to strangle her the night before. The longer the girl talked, the more she lost control, and finally, her mother cried. She knew about it, she was there when it happened, but for some reason she did not contact the police. On the night of September 21, 2013, at 10:30 p.m., Rosario and Alfonso were at the police station for another reason. They reported their daughter, Assunta, was missing for several hours. Then, Rosario recounted Assunta's story of the attempted attack from 2.5 months prior. This left them fearful that the attacker had returned and something terrible might have happened to their daughter. They were terrified she had been kidnapped. Alfonso was convinced she was no longer alive. They urgently pleaded with the police to take immediate action. In the early hours of September 22, 2 men were driving through a forest on their way back from a bar. Suddenly, the driver stopped, saying he noticed something unusual in the forest. He didn't understand what was going on, so he turned his headlights toward the forest and mentioned to his friend that he felt like someone was watching them. Despite this, he wasn't scared, likely due to the alcohol he had consumed, so he got out of the car and walked a few steps into the forest. In the light of the car's headlights, he saw something on the ground that looked like a doll. As he approached, he realized it was a girl. She was tied up, and her clothes were dirty. He checked for a pulse and found that the girl was dead. Then, they quickly contacted the police. The police identified the body as Assunta, who had died just a week before her 13th birthday. While examining the area near her body, they discovered her mobile phone, which contained some disturbing photographs. There are several photos of she wrapped tightly, lying with her eyes wide open. Some forensic experts suggested her dilated pupils indicated possible drug use. Even more distressing were photos of the girl in revealing clothing, with bright makeup, fishnet stockings, and posing provocatively on a couch. Her eyes remained wide open, and her pupils were dilated. These photos later appeared on the internet, were widely circulated and making people angry about how a child was treated like that. Asunta's last day was described by her parents as ordinary. However, then little girl suddenly went missing and was found dead a few hours after they reported her disappearance. On that day, the girl went to visit her father, Alfonso, at his work, and then hurried back home, so she not wanting to miss The Simpsons at about 7 p.m. After she returned home, Rosario, her mother, came back from work and saw her daughter in her room, where she had her books spread out on the floor for homework. Rosario didn't notice anything unusual and left to go to their country house, which was about half an hour away, to pick up bathing suits and other items for a planned beach outing the next day. Rosario returned around 9:30 p.m., and by then, Asunta was no longer in the apartment. Rosario became worried because little girl hadn't called or mentioned any plans to go out, which was unusual for her. Thinking maybe she had gone to see friends, Rosario started calling the girl's friends and Alfonso, but nobody had seen she. Rosario was the last person to see Asunta alive, making her one of the first individuals the detectives focused on, and she was questioned at the station. During her discussion with the police, Rosario recalled the incidents of July 4th, the night of the first attack. When they returned from the store that evening, Asunta closed the front door but left the key in the lock. Her mother didn't notice, and they went to bed. Around 3 a.m., Rosario was awakened by cries for help. Rosario rushed to her daughter's room and saw a large man pinning little girl to the floor, seemingly trying to strangle her. She attacked the intruder, but he was very strong and easily threw her against the wall. Fortunately, no one was harmed, and the attacker fled. Rosario described him as a strong, middle-aged man dressed in black, wearing a mask and gloves, so it is not possible to give a more detailed description. Asunta told her friend about what happened and even sent several photos showing red marks on her neck. Asunta's father, Alfonso, mentioned that little girl had struggled with depression for a long time and was taking medication prescribed by doctors. This was confirmed because Asunta talked to friends and shared her experiences. Recently, she had been speaking more positively about her situation, saying she felt much better. However, after Asunta was first attacked, Rosario did not investigate to find out what was happening to her daughter. She cited Asunta's fragile emotional state and said she feared contacting police would upset Asunta. This explanation was not very convincing. Over the years, Asunta had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital because she often expressed end-her-life thoughts. Besides, she is very tired because of the overload of knowledge at school and extra classes. The nanny also said that Rosario had recently become very frustrated with Asunta, as little girl was no longer meeting Rosario's expectations, and her academic performance had declined. She had become somewhat of a burden, prompting Rosario to consider sending her to study in Poland. However, Rosario did not mention this to the detectives, so they decided to investigate Rosario's immediately. They were particularly interested in the country house Rosario visited on the day Asunta disappeared. As it turned out, when detectives got there, they found Asunta's body lying just 4 kilometers away. Rosario appeared surprised to see them. She was furious. She quickly headed to the second floor, clearly trying to hide something. When a detective checked a nearby trash can, he found a piece of orange rope inside, identical to the one used to tie Asunta's hands and feet. There was also a black mask and gloves. All these items were collected for examination, but unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found. The investigative committee conducted several autopsies. They did not measure the body temperature immediately, fearing it might compromise the evidence, so the exact time of death couldn't be determined. However, it was estimated that Assunta was killed around 8 p.m. The cause of death was suffocation. Her mouth and nose were covered with a soft object, likely a pillow, which prevented her from breathing, leading to unconsciousness and eventually death. In addition, an autopsy determined that Assunta had taken at least 27 lorazepam pills on the day of her death, 9 times the normal amount for an adult. Hair tests revealed this was not the first occurrence. Little girl had overdoses 3 months before her death, starting when the attacker first breaks into the home. It's important to note that overdoses of this drug can cause amnesia and loss of muscle control. The drug was used to treat anxiety disorders and insomnia. The police discovered that Rosario used it to combat depression, but it was not prescribed for Assunta. No one could explain why Assunta took the drug. According to Rosario, the criminals gave Assunta medicine so she wouldn't remember the incident. Detectives conducted a review of CCTV footage in the area to track Assunta's movements that day. Around 2 p.m., she visited her father, Alfonso. At 5:21 p.m., she returned home, and at 5:28 p.m., Rosario returned home. At 6:20 p.m., a gas station camera recorded a green Mercedes belonging to Rosario. She admitted the car was moving towards a house in the country. It was clear that besides the driver, there was a girl in the car, identified as Assunta. They were heading in the direction where Assunta's body was later found. The new testimony completely contradicted Rosario's earlier statements, making she the primary suspect in the murder. Therefore, she was questioned again. Rosario's face showed fear and shame because she had let her adopted daughter go missing while she was responsible for taking care of the girl. Then, she offered a different version of events. According to her, they went out to get swimsuits together, but when they arrived at the country house, Assunta refused to enter with her. Assunta chose to stay in the car while Rosario took everything she needed and did some small work. However, this took longer than expected, and Assunta wanted to return home to do chores and rest. Rosario agreed and drove her daughter back. But she dropped her daughter off about a 20-minute walk from their apartment to avoid navigating the narrow streets. However, the police reviewed CCTV footage from the outskirts of Santiago but found no evidence of Rosario taking her daughter back home. They only saw footage of Rosario leaving her country house alone around 9 p.m. Her story is full of controversial and contradictory details. She appeared to look at the detectives with arrogance, displaying coldness and showing no regret over the loss of her child. She persistently insisted that the large man in black was involved in the incident. When the police interviewed the Botera family's neighbors, one mentioned hearing screams at night in July, when Assunta was first attacked. He also observed something unusual. Even though the attacker entered an area where dogs lived, the dogs were silent, indicating that the attacker was very familiar with them. All in all, everything seemed suspicious, making them even more suspicious that Rosario and Alfonso were involved in the murder of their adopted daughter. The police considered different theories about the first home invasion. Some thought it was fabricated by Rosario, while others suspected it was the parents' first attempt at murder. Few believed an outsider was involved. On September 24th, Rosario and Alfonso held a funeral, during which they behaved oddly, even taking a selfie in front of the coffin. Due to inconsistencies in her testimony, Rosario was arrested after the funeral. By then, detectives had discovered what might have been the motive behind the crime. Witnesses came forward with information about incident from 9 months prior to the tragedy, and this may have been the beginning of the bloody end. In January 2013, Rosario started a relationship with a realtor named Manuel Garcia, whom she hired to sell real estate. Manuel was married and made it clear he would not leave his family. He considers the relationship with Rosario to be nothing more than an affair. Rosario was fine with this, and their secret relationship continued. During this time, her relationship with her husband, Alfonso, quickly deteriorated. She finds Alfonso boring and considers him a failure who overestimates himself. She described him as insensitive, while her lover, Manuel, was the complete opposite. After Alfonso finds messages from Rosario's lover on his wife's phone, they divorced in February 2013. Rosario and her daughter Assunta continued living in the apartment. She maintained her business and visited a country house. Custody of the daughter, Assunta, was shared, and both parents have the right to see the little girl. After Assunta's parents divorced, she lived in both her father's and her mother's houses. Many observed that she was always close to her mother, while her relationship with her father was not as warm. However, her father made efforts to improve their relationship. He also repeatedly told his ex-wife Rosario that they would be forever tied together through their adopted daughter. Is it possible that because Rosario wants to completely cut off contact with her ex-husband, so she will cause the innocent child to leave forever? It is known that earlier in the summer, Rosario had to end her relationship with her lover, Manuel. Alfonso took advantage of the opportunity, he convincing Rosario to end her relationship with Manuel in exchange for his help with their daughter while she was in the hospital. And Rosario agreed to this request. However, it was revealed that on September 21st, Rosario broke her promise, she spending most of the day with Manuel and only returning home in the evening. This is very suspicious, because soon after, Assunta was killed. During the investigation, numerous assumptions were made, including one significant point emphasized by the defense. They argued that male DNA was found on the clothes Assunta's, indicating a man's involvement. While it was considered possible that the mother was not involved in the crime, this scenario was deemed unlikely. Police have stepped up their investigation, collecting documents for analysis, focusing on identifying male DNA on Assunta's body. Several options were considered during the investigation. At first, Alfonso was suspected, but then all attention turned to Manuel. However, he had an alibi and had no motive to harm Assunta, so he was quickly dismissed as a suspect. Surprisingly, the DNA was identified as belonging to a stranger named Ramra, a Colombian citizen who lived in Madrid, about a 6-hour drive from Santiago, where the incident occurred. This may seem strange. When questioned, Ramra fervently denied any connection to the case, claiming he had never been to Santiago and had no involvement in the murder. Indeed, Ramra had an alibi. He was having dinner at a restaurant in Madrid with his girlfriend and was captured on CCTV footage there. Why had Assunta been taking prescription drugs in the months leading up to the incident without any prescription? Further examinations revealed that only a portion of the DNA traces found belonged to Ramra. The lab staff suggested that the match could be due to poor quality samples or contamination. There were even suggestions that someone might have intentionally tampered with the sample's DNA to mislead the investigation. At this stage, many questions remained unanswered, and detectives considered even the most unlikely scenarios. Rosario and Alfonso seemed indifferent to what happened to their adopted daughter. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, and the press speculated that she could have acted alone. Despite her fragile appearance, but investigators doubted she could physically manage Assunta's body. Using cell phone towers, police tried to determine the whereabouts of Rosario and Alfonso at the time of the incident. On that day, their phones were turned off. This makes the police even more suspicious of them. However, Rosario explained it was a coincidence, and their phones just run out of battery at the same time. They don't have any bad intentions. After talking to a local pharmacist, who was also a friend of Rosario's, they discovered that Rosario first contacted the pharmacist on July 5. the day after an intruder broke into the house and attacked Assunta. After that, this drug lorazepam was purchased in large quantities by Rosario. Considering all the circumstances, the detectives decided to arrest Alfonso Botera. Some of Assunta's teachers had noticed unusual behavior in her. One day, Assunta attended her violin lesson with her father, Alfonso, and she seemed unable to control herself. Alfonso explained that his daughter was just under the influence of allergy medication. The teachers observed that she was usually very reserved and did not share her problems. The drowsiness incident occurred repeatedly, but the parents always had excuses, typically citing her health condition. The teacher was suspicious and distrustful of the girl's parents. When the police interviewed Assunta's teacher, she described Assunta's symptoms and behavior, which matched many side effects of the medication. 2 days before the tragedy, the last suspicious incident happened. On that day, Rosario informed the teacher that her daughter couldn't attend class due to a severe reaction to prescribed medications. After hearing this, the detectives were convinced that the adoptive parents knew about the medications and attempted to poison Assunta. Although Rosario and Alfonso were divorced, but Alfonso was determined to reconcile with she. In June 2013, 3 months before the tragedy, Rosario experienced a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. During this time, Alfonso moved back in, feeling optimistic as his wish to reunite with his family seemed to be coming true. During this period, Rosario ended her relationship with her lover. Alfonso visited her in the hospital and cared for her after her discharge. It seemed like family matters were improving, but later it was revealed that she had lied, she continuing her affair and meeting her lover on the day of the murder. Given the new information, the investigation believes that Alfonso sought revenge. Perhaps he wanted to cause Rosario more pain than he had to endure from her betrayal. This could explain why the orange rope ended up in the trash at the country house. It was simply tossed there by Alfonso. However, why was Rosario so alarmed when the police arrived, and why did she immediately check the trash? She likely knew about these items and was an accomplice. The police have discovered a new clue. Whenever Alfonso was at home with Rosario and Assunta, the little girl be drugged with lorazepam. However, Alfonso refused to comment on this, claiming he was not guilty. After the arrest, Rosario's behavior was unstable, alternating between hysteria and depression. Meanwhile, Alfonso remained quiet and calm, he constantly trying to reassure Rosario's by saying they just needed to love and support each other, and that everything would soon be over. Despite his soothing words, the police noticed his cold demeanor. Eventually, the police found the storage media Alfonso used. It turned out that the hard drive on his laptop had been completely replaced. Experts discovered that over 500,000 photos and videos had been stored on it, likely compromising material. The police also found that he had an unhealthy interest in Asian girls on his social media page. Evidence showed he had dozens of interactions and correspondence with Asian girls, and according to investigators, the photos suggested these girls were minors. Additionally, he often showed interest in adult Asian women with very youthful appearances. Later, a woman who owned an escort agency approached the police. She confessed that Alfonso was a regular at her establishment, always requesting only Asian women and insisting they dress as schoolgirls. Even his wife was aware of this preference. Photos of the murdered Assunta in revealing clothes made the situation even more serious. The prosecutor focused on how the seemingly calm and quiet Alfonso had cruelly treated his adopted daughter Assunta. The charges suggested that Rosario and Alfonso were criminals covering for each other, with both involved Assunta's death. What could have motivated the crime? Rosario and Alfonso refused to cooperate with the investigation and wouldn't communicate without their lawyers. Later, on their attorney's advice, they completely stopped commenting on the tragedy. Forensic psychiatrists were crucial to the investigation. They analyzed Rosario and Alfonso's behavior and identified them as narcissists with personality disorders. It appeared they adopted Assunta to present a loving family image, pressured by Rosario's parents. Sadly, Assunta became a mere pawn for them, and once she was no longer needed, they first exploited her and then decided to eliminate her. A 15-year-old acquaintance of Assunta testified for the prosecution. Although Alfonso claimed he stayed home all day until the evening on the day of the murder, this was proven false. The girl saw him around 6 p.m. near Rosario's house, a fact later confirmed by camera footage. Alfonso was captured on camera at 9 p.m. after Assunta had disappeared. These conflicting details added to the evidence against Rosario and Alfonso. The trial was highly controversial, with even the judge's conduct coming under scrutiny. Many suspected he sought fame, suspicions that were later validated when he authored a book about the case after the trial concluded. Relatives and neighbors of the Botera family watched for years as the foster parents tried to create the best environment for Assunta. They are financially well off, ambitious and have a tough personality, but those close to them notice their devotion to Assunta. Many people still believe that the trial's outcome was a miscarriage of justice. In court, Rosario and Alfonso maintained their innocence. Alfonso remained calm and reasonable, while Rosario often cried, became hysterical. She puzzled in her testimony in justifying his behavior with the effects of the drug. Rosario's cousin testified at the trial and shared some new information. In 2011 and 2012, Rosario's parents both passed away suddenly at home. Their deaths were suspected to be under unusual circumstances. The cousin believed that Rosario was involved in the murders of her parents and daughter to inherit the entire property. However, the defense attorney rejected these claims. Rosario's mother passed away at the age of 77 and her father passed away at the age of 88. Both passed away peacefully from old age in their sleep in their beds. Although doctors found nothing unusual, their bodies, like Assunta's, were cremated, making it impossible to verify any unnatural causes of death. Meanwhile, the prosecutor contended that Rosario and Alfonso were true sociopaths. Alfonso was apparently a pedophile who drugged his daughter and chose to record these incidents. Assunta posed a threat of exposing them, leading to the decision to eliminate her. This theory was supported by numerous photographs and evidence indicating that Alfonso had an unhealthy obsession with young Asian girls. It is likely that Rosario was complicit in these activities or was at least aware of them but chose to protect Alfonso's wrongdoings. Alternatively, Rosario might have seen the girl as a burden and decided to eliminate little girl with the help of Alfonso. On October 30, 2015, the court found Rosario and Alfonso guilty and sentenced each to 18 years in prison. After beginning their sentences, they both appealed, but their appeals were rejected. On November 18, 2020, Rosario was discovered dead in her prison cell with a belt around her neck. This was her third try to end her life. Alfonso remains imprisoned and maintains his innocence.